Sometimes the most profound mysteries announce themselves not with a scream, but with perfect quiet. Diablo Lake sits 800 feet above sea level in the North Cascades, a reservoir created in 1930 when Seattle City Light completed the Diablo Dam. The lake stretches 3.5 miles through granite peaks that rise nearly 7,000 feet on either side, creating a natural amphitheater where sound carries with unusual clarity. Local acoustic engineers have long noted how voices travel across the water here, echoing off canyon walls, with such precision that whispered conversations can be heard from distances that should make them impossible to detect. The lake's distinctive turquoise color comes from glacial flour, fine particles of rock ground down by the movement of ice and suspended in the water. This sediment gives Diablo Lake an almost artificial appearance, as if someone had added dye to create the perfect postcard image. The surrounding wilderness receives fewer than 50,000 visitors annually, making it one of the more isolated destinations in the North Cascades National Park complex. Most hikers access the area via the Diablo Lake Trail, a moderately difficult 7-mile round trip that follows the north shore before climbing to an overlook. The trail itself has an unremarkable safety record. Between 1968 and 2010, search and rescue teams responded to only 12 incidents in the immediate area, mostly involving minor injuries or hikers who became temporarily disoriented in fog. Park rangers describe the terrain as challenging but not dangerous for experienced hikers with proper equipment. What makes Diablo Lake unusual among North Cascades destinations is not its beauty or its isolation, but what happened there during the summer of 1987. The first report came from a group of 3-day hikers on July 14th. Mark Peterson, a geology professor from the University of Washington, had brought his wife Sarah and their teenage daughter Jennifer to photograph the lake from the main overlook. They reached their destination around 10:30 in the morning and began setting up camera equipment on the rocky outcrop that provides the classic view of the reservoir. According to Peterson's written statement, filed with park headquarters 3 days later, the silence began at exactly 11:12. He noted the time because he had just checked his watch to calculate how long they had been hiking. The change, he wrote, was immediate and complete. The sound of wind through pine needles stopped. Water lapping against the shoreline below went quiet. Even their own voices, when they tried to speak, produced no sound they could hear. Peterson described the experience as similar to sudden hearing loss, except that all 3 family members were affected simultaneously. They could feel vibrations when they stamped their feet on rock, but heard nothing. Sarah Peterson later told park rangers that she clapped her hands repeatedly during the silence, feeling the impact but hearing nothing, not even the echo that should have bounced back from the canyon walls across the lake. The silence ended at 11:29. 17 minutes exactly. Sound returned as abruptly as it had disappeared. Birds resumed calling from the forest below. Wind moved through trees again. The family could hear their own voices and the distant sound of water flowing through the dam spillway nearly a mile away. What disturbed Peterson most, according to his statement, was not the acoustic anomaly itself, but something else that occurred during those 17 minutes. All 3 family members reported the same sensation. They felt observed, not by wildlife or other hikers, but by something beneath the surface of the lake. Peterson wrote that the feeling was so strong he found himself scanning the water repeatedly, expecting to see something break the surface, though nothing ever did. The second incident occurred 19 days later. On August 2nd, a group of 4 backpackers from Portland had camped near the lakeshore and were breaking camp when the silence descended. Like the Peterson family, they noted the exact time, 8:47 in the morning. The duration was identical, 17 minutes. James Mitchell, the group's leader, was an experienced wilderness guide who had spent more than 15 years leading trips throughout the Pacific Northwest. In his report to park officials, Mitchell noted that the silence was unlike anything he had encountered in nature. Complete acoustic dead zones, he explained, do occur in certain weather conditions or geographic formations, but they typically affect specific frequencies of sound, not all sound simultaneously. Mitchell's group also reported feeling watched from the water. Two members of his party, both experienced divers, said the sensation reminded them of what they had felt when observing large marine animals from below the surface. A sense of vast intelligence, just out of sight. The third documented case happened on September 15th. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a National Park Service researcher studying noise pollution in wilderness areas, was conducting acoustic measurements at various points around the lake when her equipment registered what she initially assumed was a malfunction. Her sound meters, positioned at 3 different locations around the lakeshore, simultaneously recorded 0 decibels of ambient noise for exactly 17 minutes, starting at 2:14 in the afternoon. Vasquez was alone during the incident. In her formal report, she noted that the silence felt different from the controlled acoustic environments she had experienced in laboratory settings. Laboratory silence, she wrote, feels empty. The silence at Diablo Lake felt full, as if the absence of sound was itself a presence. Like the previous witnesses, Vasquez reported feeling observed from the lake. She was trained to be objective about subjective experiences, but noted in her report that the sensation was strong enough to make her pack her equipment and leave the area before completing her planned measurements. Park officials reviewed all 3 reports and found no common factors that might explain the acoustic anomalies. Weather conditions were different on each date. Atmospheric pressure readings from the nearest weather station showed normal ranges. There was no construction or industrial activity in the area that might have created unusual sound dampening effects. The National Park Service contacted the University of Washington Department of Atmospheric Sciences to request a technical evaluation of the reports. Dr. Robert Chen, a specialist in environmental acoustics, reviewed the witness statements and Dr. Vasquez's equipment readings. His written assessment concluded that while localized acoustic anomalies do occur in mountainous terrain, the consistency of duration and the complete absence of all sound frequencies made the reports highly unusual. Chen recommended further study, but noted that reproducing the phenomenon would require continuous monitoring equipment positioned around the lake. The Park Service approved the installation of 3 permanent acoustic monitoring stations in October of 1987. The monitoring equipment operated continuously for 14 months. During that time, it recorded normal acoustic patterns consistent with the lake environment: wind, water movement, wildlife, and occasional aircraft passing overhead. No acoustic anomalies were detected. In December of 1988, the monitoring project was discontinued due to budget constraints. The equipment was removed, and no further official study of acoustic phenomena at Diablo Lake was conducted. However, reports continued to filter in through informal channels. Between 1988 and 2005, park rangers logged at least 12 additional reports of acoustic anomalies at Diablo Lake, though none were investigated formally. Each report described the same pattern: complete silence, lasting exactly 17 minutes, accompanied by a strong sensation of being observed from the water. In 2006, the North Cascades National Park Service Complex implemented a new incident reporting system that categorized acoustic anomaly reports under miscellaneous natural phenomena. These reports are no longer investigated unless they involve safety concerns or property damage. The park's current superintendent, when asked about the Diablo Lake incidents, states that acoustic anomalies in mountainous terrain are not uncommon, and that the park does not have resources to investigate subjective phenomena reported by visitors. Today, the Diablo Lake Overlook remains a popular photography destination. The trail receives steady use from day hikers and backpackers. Most visitors experience nothing unusual beyond the lake's remarkable beauty and the clarity of sound that carries across the water. But some visitors still report periods of complete silence that last exactly 17 minutes. And some still describe the unsettling feeling of being watched by something just beneath the turquoise surface, something that understands the difference between quiet and silence, between empty and full. The lake keeps its own time now, measuring something that official clocks cannot record. Some secrets erase themselves before anyone can learn what they were meant to hide. The Hanford Nuclear Reservation sprawls across 586 square miles of south-central Washington state, along the Columbia River, between the cities of Richland and Pasco. Established in 1943 as part of the Manhattan Project, Hanford produced plutonium for the atomic bombs that ended World War II. For 44 years, the facility operated under a veil of secrecy so complete that many workers never knew what they were manufacturing. By 1989, Hanford had become the most contaminated nuclear site in the Western Hemisphere. The Department of Energy began an extensive cleanup effort that continues today, with an estimated completion date sometime after 2070. Part of this effort involved declassifying thousands of documents related to Hanford's operations, making them available to researchers, journalists, and members of the public for the first time. The Hanford Public Reading Room opened in 1991 in the Federal Building in Richland. The facility housed both physical documents and computer terminals where visitors could access digitized records. The reading room operated under standard federal protocols. Visitors signed in with photo identification, submitted document requests to staff librarians, and worked under supervision in a monitored environment. Most researchers who used the facility were investigating health effects of radiation exposure, environmental contamination, or the historical record of nuclear weapons production. The documents they accessed were heavily redacted, but contained enough information to piece together previously unknown details about Hanford's operations during the Cold War. The reading room processed an average of 30 visitors per month during its first 3 years of operation. Staff maintained detailed logs of who accessed which documents and when. Security protocols required that all materials remain in the reading room, and that visitors could only take handwritten notes. Dr. Margaret Chen was the first researcher to report the anomaly that would later affect 16 others. Chen, an environmental historian from Washington State University, was researching atmospheric testing conducted at Hanford during the 1950s. On September 12, 1994, she requested access to files related to meteorological monitoring stations operated by the Atomic Energy Commission. The librarian on duty, Patricia Valdez, located the requested materials and provided Chen with 4 file boxes containing documents dated between 1951 and 1958. While reviewing the contents, Chen discovered references to something called Project Silent Current in 3 separate documents. The references were brief: funding allocations, personnel assignments, and a single mention of atmospheric data collection protocols for Silent Current Phase 2. Chen requested additional materials related to this project. Valdez searched both the physical catalog and the computer database. She found 17 boxes of documents specifically labeled Project Silent Current Atmospheric Research Division. The files had been declassified in 1992, but had never been requested by any previous researcher. Chen spent 6 hours reviewing the Silent Current materials. According to her notes, the project involved long-term atmospheric monitoring using equipment that was not described in standard meteorological documents from the same period. The project appeared to have operated from 1952 to 1961 at multiple sites across the Hanford Reservation. Personnel records showed the involvement of scientists from the University of Chicago, MIT, and the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. Most intriguingly, the Silent Current files contained detailed weather data that did not match records from the National Weather Service for the same dates and locations. The discrepancies were not minor variations, but entirely different atmospheric conditions, recorded by instruments that seemed to be measuring something other than standard meteorological phenomena. Chen photocopied 17 pages of documents, following standard reading room procedures. She planned to return the following week to continue her research. When Chen arrived on September 19th, Valdez informed her that the silent current files were no longer available. The physical boxes had been returned to storage, and the computer database showed no record of Project Silent Current. Chen's photocopy request had been denied by security review, and the copies she had made the previous week were not in her file. Chen protested that she had personally reviewed the materials and taken extensive notes. Valdez checked with her supervisor, who contacted the Department of Energy Records Management Office in Richland. According to the DOE, no project called Silent Current had ever existed at Hanford. The files Chen described were not in their inventory. Chen's handwritten notes from her September 12th visit were the only evidence that the Silent Current documents had existed. Dr. James Morrison encountered the same phenomenon 6 months later. Morrison, a physician researching radiation exposure among Hanford workers, discovered silent current references while reviewing occupational health records from the 1950s. Like Chen, he was able to access extensive files on the project, which he found in a different section of the archive: personnel medical records. Morrison's version of the silent current files focused on health monitoring of project participants. The documents described medical examinations that were more comprehensive than standard occupational health protocols, including neurological testing and psychological evaluations that seemed designed to measure cognitive changes rather than radiation exposure effects. Morrison spent 2 days reviewing the materials and completed detailed notes on 37 individual medical files. When he returned for his third visit, the silent current materials had vanished from both the physical archive and the computer system. Between March of 1995 and October of 1996, 15 additional researchers reported identical experiences. Each discovered silent current documents in different sections of the archive: engineering reports, financial records, correspondence files, and environmental monitoring data. Each was able to access extensive materials that provided detailed information about different aspects of the project. Each found that the materials disappeared from the archive within 48 hours of their discovery. The researchers came from different institutions and were investigating different aspects of Hanford history. None knew about the experiences of the others until Dr. Morrison began informally networking with other frequent users of the reading room in late 1995. When the affected researchers compared their notes, they found remarkable consistency in their descriptions of Project Silent Current, despite accessing different categories of documents. According to their combined notes, Silent Current had been a 9-year atmospheric research program that operated at 7 locations across the Hanford Reservation. The project involved unusual monitoring equipment, specialized personnel with security clearances beyond those required for nuclear weapons work, and data collection protocols that differed significantly from standard meteorological practices. The medical files Morrison had reviewed suggested that project personnel underwent regular neurological and psychological testing. The engineering documents accessed by other researchers described equipment specifications that did not match any known atmospheric monitoring technology from the 1950s. Financial records indicated funding levels that were disproportionate to the stated scope of atmospheric research. Dr. Chen organized a meeting of affected researchers in January of 1996. 17 people attended, each bringing their handwritten notes on silent current materials. When they compiled their information, they had documentation of a Hanford project that was more extensively documented than many acknowledged programs, yet officially had never existed. The group decided to formally request access to silent current materials through Freedom of Information Act procedures. In March of 1996, Chen submitted a FOIA request to the Department of Energy, specifically requesting all documents related to Project Silent Current conducted at Hanford Nuclear Reservation between 1950 and 1970. The DOE response received 6 weeks later, stated that no records responsive to the request existed in their files. The agency had no documentation of any project called Silent Current at Hanford or any other DOE facility. Chen submitted a follow-up request that included photocopies of pages from the handwritten notes of multiple researchers. The DOE responded that while they could not verify the authenticity of the handwritten materials, they had conducted a comprehensive search of all Hanford-related archives and found no documents matching the descriptions provided. In October of 1996, Patricia Valdez, the reading room librarian who had personally retrieved Silent Current files from multiple researchers, was transferred to a DOE facility in Nevada. Her replacement, when asked about the Silent Current incidents, stated that she had reviewed all previous document requests and found no irregularities in reading room procedures. The Hanford Public Reading Room implemented new security protocols in November of 1996, including digital tracking of all document access and mandatory security reviews of research notes before visitors could leave the facility. No researcher has reported finding Silent Current materials since the new protocols were implemented. The 17 researchers who documented their encounters with the Vanishing Archive maintain that their notes accurately describe materials they personally reviewed. Several have continued their Hanford research using other sources, but have never found references to Project Silent Current in any external archives or published materials. The Department of Energy maintains comprehensive records of all projects conducted at Hanford since 1943. According to agency archivists, their inventory accounts for all research programs that operated at the facility during the period described by the researchers. Yet 17 sets of detailed notes, written by researchers who did not coordinate their documentation, describe the same non-existent project with a consistency that suggests they were all reviewing the same source materials. Today, the Hanford Public Reading Room continues to serve researchers investigating the site's environmental and health legacy. The digital tracking system logs every document accessed and every note taken. Nothing disappears anymore. But somewhere in the gap between what was recorded and what was remembered, Project Silent Current continues to erase itself, leaving only questions about what kinds of secrets can vanish so completely that even their absence becomes impossible to prove. Sometimes the most unsettling discoveries are the ones that refuse to make sense no matter how carefully you count. Molson sits 12 miles south of the Canadian border in Okanogan County, Washington, accessible only by a gravel road that branches off State Route 20 near Oroville. Founded in 1896 by mining promoter John Molson, the town briefly housed nearly 300 residents during the early gold rush years. By 1910, the mines had played out and most families had moved on. The last permanent resident left in 1958, leaving behind a collection of weathered buildings that have slowly surrendered to the high desert climate. Today, Molson exists as an unofficial ghost town maintained by the Okanogan County Historical Society. The organization conducts periodic cleanup efforts and occasionally guides tours for visitors interested in frontier history. Most of the original structures have collapsed or been dismantled for salvage, but 7 buildings remain partially intact. The old schoolhouse, 2 residential homes, a general store, the remains of the mining office, a small barn, and a single-story building that local records identify only as Structure C. Structure C stands apart from the other buildings, both geographically and architecturally. While the rest of Molson's buildings cluster along what was once Main Street, Structure C sits alone on a small rise approximately 200 yards southeast of the town center. The building measures 24 feet by 36 feet, with walls constructed from local stone rather than the wood frame construction used for other structures. County records from the early 1900s make no mention of Structure C's original purpose or construction date. The building has no windows. The single door, made of heavy timber, remains functional despite decades of weather exposure. Inside, the structure consists of a single room with a dirt floor and stone walls that rise 12 feet to a peaked wooden roof. There is no evidence of electrical wiring, plumbing, or heating systems. The interior receives light only through the doorway and gaps in the roof where wooden shingles have fallen away. What makes Structure C unusual is not its architecture, but what covers every interior surface. Dr. Sarah Mackenzie first documented the phenomenon in July of 2003. Mackenzie, an anthropologist from Eastern Washington University, was conducting a survey of abandoned settlements in the Okanogan Valley when she discovered Structure C during a routine exploration of the Molson site. Upon entering the building, she found that every available wall surface was covered with small vertical marks carved into the stone. The marks were organized in traditional tally clusters of 5, with 4 vertical lines crossed by a diagonal 5th line. Mackenzie counted systematically, photographing each section of wall to avoid duplication. The total number of marks was 2,847. Mackenzie's initial assumption was that the marks represented some form of inventory system, possibly related to mining operations or livestock counting. However, several aspects of the markings puzzled her. The depth and style of the cuts varied significantly, suggesting they had been made by different tools over an extended period. Some marks appeared fresh, with sharp edges and light-colored stone visible where the cutting tool had removed the weathered surface. Others were deeply weathered and partially obscured by natural erosion. Most puzzling was the precision of the total count. In Mackenzie's experience, informal tally systems rarely produced such exact numbers. Miners might track ore carloads, or prospectors might count samples, but these activities typically involved round numbers or approximate counts rather than specific tallies in the thousands. Mackenzie returned to Structure C 6 times between 2003 and 2005 to document the markings in detail. On each visit, she recounted the marks using different methodologies to verify her original total. Each count confirmed the same number, 2,847. During her research, Mackenzie interviewed longtime residents of the Oroville area who remembered Molson before its abandonment. 83-year-old Harold Peterson, whose grandfather had worked the Molson mines, recalled Structure C from his childhood visits to the town in the 1930s. According to Peterson, local children were forbidden from entering the building, though he could not recall the reason for this prohibition. Margaret Walsh, a retired schoolteacher who had lived in Oroville since 1945, remembered Structure C being discussed among local families as a place where the counting never stopped. Walsh could not explain what this phrase meant, but said it was commonly used to warn children away from the building. In 2006, the Okanogan County Historical Society decided to include Structure C in their official documentation of the Molson site. Volunteer historian David Chen accompanied Mackenzie on a follow-up visit to create a comprehensive photographic record of the markings. Chen brought different equipment and documentation methods than Mackenzie had used. Using a high-resolution digital camera and systematic grid photography, he captured detailed images of every section of marked wall surface. When he processed the images and conducted his count, he found the same total Mackenzie had recorded, 2,847 marks. However, Chen noticed something Mackenzie had not documented. The marks were not randomly distributed across the available wall space. They followed a specific pattern, beginning at the left side of the entrance wall and proceeding clockwise around the room in orderly rows. The marking pattern suggested a methodical, systematic approach rather than casual or informal counting. Chen also observed that the marks extended to areas of the wall that would be difficult to reach without a ladder or other assistance. Marks appeared as high as 10 feet from the floor, requiring deliberate effort to access. This suggested that whoever had created the marks had come prepared with appropriate tools and had planned to use the entire available surface area. The Historical Society's documentation project attracted attention from other researchers. In 2007, Dr. Michael Torres, a forensic specialist from the University of Washington, analyzed samples of the carved stone to determine the age and sequence of the markings. Torres found that the marks had been created using at least 7 different types of cutting tools over a period spanning approximately 60 years. The oldest marks, based on weathering patterns and tool mark analysis, appeared to date from the 1920s. The newest marks showed minimal weathering and appeared to have been made within the previous 5 years. Torres's analysis raised new questions about the markings. The extended time frame suggested that multiple individuals had contributed to the count over several decades. Yet the systematic organization and precise total indicated coordination between these individuals, or adherence to some shared system. Perhaps most puzzling, Torres found evidence that some older marks had been deliberately removed or modified. In several locations, the stone showed signs of grinding or chiseling that had eliminated previous markings before new ones were carved. This suggested that the total count of 2,847 was being actively maintained rather than simply accumulated. The Historical Society shared Torres's findings with the Washington State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. The department reviewed the documentation but declined to designate Structure C as a historic site, citing insufficient evidence of historical significance. In 2008, vandals damaged several buildings at the Molson site, including Structure C. Someone had attempted to chisel away portions of the marked walls, removing an estimated 50 to 75 individual tally marks. When Historical Society volunteers visited the site to assess the damage, they found that new marks had been carved to replace the damaged ones, restoring the total to exactly 2,847. No one witnessed the restoration of the marks. The Historical Society's previous visit had been 6 weeks before the vandalism was discovered. The replacement marks were carved in fresh stone, using techniques consistent with the most recent additions documented by Torres. The incident prompted the Historical Society to install a simple motion-activated trail camera near Structure C in 2009. The camera operated for 14 months, recording hundreds of images of wildlife and occasional visitors to the site. It captured no footage of anyone adding marks to the walls of Structure C. In March of 2010, the camera recorded something unusual. A series of images taken over a 3-hour period showed a single figure working inside Structure C, but the person's activities were not visible due to the building's windowless design. The figure appeared in the first image entering the structure, and in the final image leaving approximately 3 hours later. The camera's infrared sensor indicated someone was inside the building during the entire interval, but no intermediate images showed the person exiting or entering. When Historical Society volunteers checked Structure C after reviewing the camera footage, they found 12 new tally marks had been added to continue the systematic pattern along the wall. The total count remained 2,847. This suggested that 12 older marks had been removed and replaced with new ones in different locations. The camera was stolen the following month. The Historical Society decided not to replace it due to budget constraints and the remote location of the site. Current visitors to Structure C continue to find exactly 2,847 tally marks carved into the walls. The marks follow the same systematic pattern documented by earlier researchers, proceeding clockwise around the room in orderly rows. Some marks appear freshly carved, while others show significant weathering, suggesting the count continues to be actively maintained. Local authorities have no record of permits issued for work at the Molson site. The Historical Society receives no reports of authorized maintenance or research activities at Structure C. Yet, the building maintains its precise count, accumulating and adjusting its mysterious tally according to rules that no official record can explain. The counting continues in the abandoned town where no one lives, marking progress toward a total that never changes, maintained by hands that arrive and depart without witness, serving a purpose that died with the last resident, who might have remembered what was important enough to count for more than 90 years. Some appointments are scheduled for places that should not exist. Deception. Pass State Park spans 4,134 acres across Whidbey and Fidalgo Islands in northwestern Washington state, connected by the iconic Deception Pass Bridge that rises 180 feet above the churning waters below. Established in 1923, the park attracts over 2 million visitors annually to its network of hiking trails, camping areas, and scenic overlooks. The park's dense forests of Douglas fir and western red cedar create a maze of secondary trails and unofficial paths that can disorient even experienced hikers. The geography of Deception Pass has always been challenging to map precisely. Steep ravines, dense undergrowth, and frequent fog create blind spots where GPS signals become unreliable. Park rangers routinely conduct search and rescue operations for visitors who become lost on unmarked trails. The terrain is forgiving enough that most missing hikers are found within a few hours, usually having wandered off established paths while pursuing wildlife photography or exploring areas not covered by official park maps. What makes Deception Pass unusual among Washington state parks is not its natural beauty or its complex trail system, but the temporary structures that occasionally appear in locations where no building should exist. The first documented incident occurred on August 15, 1983. A family of 4 camping at Bowman Bay reported finding what they described as a medical waiting room while hiking on the Goose Rock Trail. According to their statement to park rangers, the room was located approximately 1 mile from the main trail, in a clearing that had not been visible from the path. Robert Martinez, the family's father, provided the most detailed description. The room measured approximately 12 feet by 16 feet and appeared to be constructed from standard office materials: drop ceiling tiles, fluorescent lighting, carpeted floors, and wood-paneled walls. 6 chairs, upholstered in green vinyl, were arranged around a small coffee table containing magazines. A reception desk with a closed appointment book occupied one corner of the room. Martinez noted that the magazines appeared to be from the 1950s, issues of Life, Look, and Saturday Evening Post, with dates ranging from 1952 to 1957. The magazines were in excellent condition, showing no signs of weather damage despite being located in an outdoor forest environment. The most unsettling aspect of the room, according to Martinez, was that it felt completely normal. The fluorescent lights functioned properly, providing bright illumination even though no electrical connections were visible. The air inside felt climate-controlled, maintaining a comfortable temperature despite the August heat outside. The carpeting showed no moisture damage from rain or groundwater seepage. Martinez attempted to examine the appointment book on the reception desk, but found it locked. He could see through the clear plastic cover that the pages contained handwritten appointments, but could not read the specific entries. The family marked the location and returned with park rangers the following day. The clearing was empty. No evidence of the waiting room remained, and the ground showed no signs that any structure had been present. Park rangers initially dismissed the report as a case of mistaken location. The Martinez family insisted they had marked the correct spot, but searches of the surrounding area found no evidence of any temporary or permanent structures. 6 months later, in February of 1984, park volunteer Susan Caldwell encountered what she believed to be the same waiting room while conducting a winter trail assessment. Caldwell found the room in a different location, approximately 2 miles from where the Martinez family had reported their sighting. Caldwell's description matched the earlier report in most details: 6 green vinyl chairs, 1950s magazines, fluorescent lighting, and a reception desk with a locked appointment book. However, Caldwell noticed additional details. The magazines, while appearing to be vintage issues, contained articles about current events from 1984. A Life magazine dated 1955 featured a cover story about the Space Shuttle program. A Look magazine from 1953 included an article about personal computers. Caldwell attempted to photograph the room using a Polaroid camera she carried for trail documentation. The camera malfunctioned repeatedly, producing only blank images despite functioning normally before and after her visit to the waiting room. Like the Martinez family, Caldwell marked the location and returned with other park staff the next day. The waiting room had vanished, leaving no trace of its presence. Between 1984 and 2010, park rangers documented 38 additional reports of visitors encountering the waiting room. Each incident followed the same pattern. Hikers would discover the fully furnished room in various locations throughout the park, report it to authorities, and find it gone when they returned with others. The reports came from diverse sources: experienced hikers, casual visitors, park volunteers, and professional researchers conducting environmental studies. None appeared to know about previous incidents, yet their descriptions remained remarkably consistent. Dr. Patricia Wells, a psychologist from the University of Washington, who frequently used the park for stress research studies, encountered the waiting room in September of 2003. Wells had hiked alone to conduct baseline measurements for a study on nature therapy when she discovered the room in a grove of old-growth cedars near Cornet Bay. Wells spent 45 minutes examining the room and making detailed notes. She confirmed the presence of period-appropriate magazines with anachronistic content, functioning fluorescent lights with no visible power source, and climate control that maintained a comfortable environment despite the outdoor setting. Wells was able to force open the appointment book using a Swiss Army knife. Inside, she found pages of handwritten appointments spanning from 1955 to dates several years in the future. The appointments were scheduled at 15-minute intervals throughout each day, with names like J. Patterson, 2:15 p.m., consultation, and M. Rodriguez, 4:30 p.m. OO. Follow-up: Wells cross-referenced 43 names from the appointment book with park visitor logs, local phone directories, and public records. None of the names matched any documented visitors to Deception Pass State Park. When she researched the names through broader public records searches, she found that several appeared to be people who had lived in the Seattle area during the appropriate time periods, though many had died decades before their scheduled appointments. Wells attempted to photograph the appointment book pages, but experienced the same camera malfunction reported by previous witnesses. Her digital camera functioned normally outside the waiting room, but produced corrupted files when used inside the structure. When Wells returned the following day with a research assistant and video equipment, the waiting room had disappeared. The grove where she had found it showed no evidence of disturbance. The Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission reviewed Wells's report and the accumulated documentation from previous incidents. In 2004, the commission authorized a formal investigation, led by the park's chief ranger, Michael Thompson. Thompson organized systematic searches of areas where the waiting room had been reported. Using GPS coordinates provided by witnesses, search teams mapped a pattern of sightings that covered approximately 60% of the park's total area. No correlation emerged between sighting locations and any geographic or environmental factors. The investigation team installed motion-activated trail cameras at 12 locations where multiple sightings had been reported. The cameras operated continuously for 18 months, recording thousands of images of wildlife and park visitors. None captured any evidence of the waiting room. In 2005, Thompson submitted a final report, concluding that while witness accounts appeared sincere and consistent, no physical evidence supported the existence of any temporary structure matching the described waiting room. The commission classified the incidents as unsubstantiated anomalous reports and discontinued active investigation. However, reports continued. Between 2006 and 2020, park rangers logged 17 additional encounters with the waiting room. Each followed the established pattern: discovery by visitors, detailed descriptions matching previous reports, disappearance before official verification. Park policy now treats waiting room reports as routine incidents requiring standard documentation, but no investigative follow-up. Rangers inform visitors that the park contains no permanent or temporary medical facilities and advise them to seek appropriate care outside the park if needed. The appointment book continues to appear in witness accounts, always locked, always containing the same mixture of historical names and future dates. No visitor has successfully photographed its contents, despite the proliferation of smartphone cameras and digital photography equipment. Current park maps show no medical facilities or office buildings within Deception Pass State Park boundaries. Architectural records contain no permits for any structure matching the waiting room's description. Yet the appointments continue to be scheduled 40 years after the first documented sighting. Somewhere in the shifting geography of Deception Pass, the fluorescent lights still hum over empty chairs, and the appointment book tracks meetings between the living and the dead, maintained by a practice that has no practitioners and serves a clinic that exists only long enough to remind visitors that some healings require appointments that can never be kept. Some voices return to you long after you thought they had been forgotten. Sol Duque Hot Springs sits 12 miles south of U.S. Highway 101 in the Olympic National Park, accessible via a winding road that cuts through ancient temperate rainforest. The natural hot springs were developed into a resort in 1910 by Michael Earls, who built pools, cabins, and a hotel to accommodate visitors seeking the therapeutic benefits of the mineral-rich waters. The original resort burned in 1966, but the site was rebuilt and has operated continuously as a destination for both day visitors and overnight guests. The springs emerge from underground aquifers heated by geothermal activity deep beneath the Olympic Mountains. 3 main pools maintain temperatures between 99 and 104 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, fed by springs that produce approximately 50 gallons per minute of sulfur-scented water. The pools are surrounded by towering Douglas fir, western hemlock, and Sitka spruce trees that create a natural amphitheater, rising several hundred feet on all sides. The surrounding forest has unusual acoustic properties. Sounds carry with remarkable clarity through the dense vegetation, allowing conversations near the pools to be heard clearly at distances that would normally render speech unintelligible. Park naturalists explain this phenomenon as a result of the forest's density and humidity, which create natural sound channels that amplify and direct audio in predictable patterns. Most visitors to Sol Duque experience these acoustic effects as a pleasant novelty. Families separated by the large pools can easily communicate across the water. Hikers calling to each other on nearby trails can be heard distinctly at the resort facilities. The forest seems to capture and carry human voices with unusual precision, creating an environment where whispered conversations travel much farther than they should. For most guests, this enhanced acoustic environment is simply part of Sol Duque's natural charm. For others, it becomes something much more unsettling. The first documented case of the delayed echo phenomenon occurred in June of 1997. Thomas and Linda Hoffman, a retired couple from Portland, were spending a long weekend at Sol Duque Resort when they experienced what they initially assumed was an unusual coincidence. On their first evening, June 14th, the Hoffmans soaked in the hot springs from approximately 7:30 to 8:15 p.m. During this time, they had a detailed conversation about their plans for the following day: hiking the Sol Duque Falls Trail, having lunch at the lodge, and spending the afternoon reading by the pools. The conversation was typical of vacation planning discussions, covering specific times, locations, and activities they hoped to pursue. 72 hours later, on June 17th, at exactly 7:30 p.m., the Hoffmans heard their own voices echoing from the forest surrounding the hot springs. According to their written statement to park rangers, the echo reproduced their entire 45-minute conversation from 3 days earlier, with perfect clarity and accuracy. Thomas Hoffman noted that the echoed conversation began at precisely the same time their original discussion had started, and followed the exact sequence of topics they had covered. The voices came from the tree line approximately 50 yards from the pools, seeming to originate from a point roughly 20 feet above ground level among the forest canopy. Linda Hoffman reported that hearing her own voice return to her after 3 days was profoundly disturbing. The echoed conversation included personal details, private observations about other guests, and intimate discussions between husband and wife that they had assumed were lost to the forest air once spoken. The Hoffmans attempted to record the echoed conversation using a small tape recorder, but the device captured only ambient forest sounds, wind through trees, distant bird calls, and the gentle bubbling of the hot springs. Their own voices, which they could hear clearly echoing their 3-day-old conversation, did not register on the recording. Resort staff listened politely to the Hoffmans' account, but offered no explanation for the phenomenon. The couple completed their vacation without further incidents, though they reported feeling continuously self-conscious about conversations they held near the pools, knowing that their words might somehow return to them days later. The Hoffmans' experience remained an isolated curiosity until September of 1998, when Dr. Janet Morrison, a linguistics professor from the University of Oregon, encountered the same phenomenon during a solo research trip to Olympic National Park. Morrison was studying acoustic environments in old-growth forests and had chosen Sol Duc as one of several locations for recording natural soundscapes. On September 9th, she spent 2 hours near the hot springs, recording ambient sounds and making voice notes about her observations. Her recorded notes included technical details about frequency patterns, environmental conditions, and equipment settings. 72 hours later, Morrison heard her own voice notes echoing from the forest canopy. The echoed recording included not only her spoken observations, but also her private commentary about the research methodology and personal reflections on her project that she had not intended to record formally. Morrison had sophisticated recording equipment with her during both the original session and the echoed playback. Her digital audio devices captured her original voice notes with professional clarity, but recorded nothing during the echoed conversation except natural forest sound. The phenomenon appeared to be acoustically real, but somehow invisible to electronic recording devices. Morrison extended her stay at Sol Duc to conduct additional tests. She recorded conversations at specific times and locations, then returned 72 hours later to document any echoed playback. Over a period of 2 weeks, she confirmed that conversations held near the hot springs consistently echoed back exactly 72 hours later, but only human voices speaking in conversational tones seemed to trigger the phenomenon. Morrison's research attracted the attention of Dr. Robert Chen from the University of Washington Department of Environmental Sciences. Chen had previously studied unusual acoustic phenomena in Pacific Northwest forests and agreed to collaborate on a formal investigation of the Sol Duc echo effect. In May of 2001, Chen and Morrison established a controlled study protocol. They positioned multiple recording devices around the hot springs area and conducted systematically timed conversations at various locations and volume levels. Their goal was to document both the original conversations and any delayed echoes using professional audio equipment. The study confirmed that conversations held near the hot springs consistently produced delayed echoes 72 hours later. However, the researchers discovered several puzzling aspects of the phenomenon that complicated their initial hypotheses. The echoed conversations were not simple audio recordings played back from the forest. They included emotional inflections, conversational pauses, and interpersonal dynamics that suggested the echoes somehow captured the full context of human communication, rather than just the acoustic properties of speech. More troubling, the echoed conversations sometimes included portions of discussions that the original speakers could not remember having. Morrison documented several instances where the delayed echo included exchanges that neither she nor Chen recalled from their original conversations. Yet the voices were unmistakably their own. Chen attempted to explain the phenomenon using known acoustic principles. He theorized that the unique geological and environmental conditions at Seoul Duk might create a natural recording and playback system similar to how certain rock formations can capture and release sound under specific atmospheric conditions. However, Chen's geological surveys found no evidence of the mineral deposits, cave systems, or atmospheric layers that would be necessary to support such a natural recording phenomenon. The Olympic Mountains geology consists primarily of sedimentary and volcanic rock that should not exhibit the crystalline properties required for acoustic storage and playback. The research team expanded their study to include psychological evaluation of witnesses. Dr. Sarah Williams, a cognitive psychologist from Pacific Lutheran University, interviewed 23 guests who reported experiencing delayed echoes at Seoul Duk between 2001 and 2004. Williams found no common psychological factors among the witnesses. They represented diverse ages, educational backgrounds, and mental health profiles. Psychological testing revealed no patterns of suggestibility, auditory processing disorders, or shared belief systems that might explain the consistent reports of delayed echoes. Most significantly, Williams documented that witnesses could accurately predict the content of delayed echoes based on conversations they had held exactly 72 hours earlier. This predictive accuracy was far higher than would be expected from false memory or suggestion, supporting the witnesses' claims that they were experiencing genuine acoustic phenomena. In 2005, the National Park Service reviewed the accumulated research and witness reports. The service acknowledged that multiple credible witnesses had reported consistent experiences, but noted that no scientific explanation supported the existence of natural acoustic recording and playback systems. The Park Service declined to fund additional research, citing budget constraints and the lack of safety concerns related to the phenomenon. Seoul Duk Hot Springs continues to operate as a normal resort facility, and park rangers receive no special training regarding acoustic anomalies. However, guest reports of delayed echoes have continued with remarkable consistency. Between 2006 and 2020, resort staff logged 47 formal reports of guests hearing their own conversations echo back from the forest exactly 72 hours after the original discussions. The reports follow the same pattern established by earlier witnesses. Conversations held near the hot springs echo back with perfect timing and accuracy, but electronic recording devices capture only ambient forest sounds during the delayed playback. Guests report feeling disturbed not by the phenomenon itself, but by the realization that their most private conversations are somehow preserved in the forest and returned to them when they least expect it. Current resort management acknowledges that some guests report unusual acoustic experiences, but maintains that Seoul Duk Hot Springs operates according to standard hospitality practices. Staff members are advised to listen respectfully to guest reports, but not to investigate or validate claims of delayed echoes. The phenomenon continues to occur with mechanical precision. Somewhere in the towering conifers that surround Seoul Duk Hot Springs, human voices wait for exactly 72 hours before returning to their speakers, carrying back not just words, but the full emotional weight of conversations that the speakers may have forgotten or wished they had never had. The forest remembers what people say and returns their words to them as a gift they never asked for, preserving the most ephemeral human experiences in an acoustic vault that operates by rules no science can explain and serves purposes that no witness has ever understood. Some projects complete themselves according to plans that were never drawn. The Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest encompasses 1.7 million acres of mountainous terrain across northwestern Washington state. stretching from the Canadian border south to Mount Rainier National Park. Established in 1924 through the consolidation of several smaller forest reserves, the area includes some of the most rugged and inaccessible wilderness in the continental United States. The Darrington Ranger District, covering approximately 300,000 acres of the forest's northern section, contains vast areas that have never been systematically surveyed or mapped. The terrain in the Darrington District presents significant challenges for traditional surveying methods. Dense old-growth forests, steep granite ridges, and frequent weather systems create conditions where GPS signals become unreliable, and ground-based measurements require extensive time and specialized equipment. Much of the area is accessible only by foot or helicopter, making comprehensive geological surveys prohibitively expensive for most research purposes. Between 1950 and 1975, the U.S. Forest Service conducted only 3 formal geological surveys within the Darrington District. These surveys focused on specific areas of commercial or recreational interest, potential timber sales, proposed campground developments, and mineral rights assessments. The vast majority of the district remained unmapped, except for basic topographic features visible from aerial photography. This changed in 1978 when the Forest Service received federal funding to conduct a comprehensive geological assessment of the Darrington District as part of a broader wilderness preservation study. The survey was intended to document geological formations, mineral deposits, and environmental conditions that would inform long-term management decisions for the area. The project began in March of 1979 under the direction of Dr. Kenneth Hayes, a geologist from the University of Washington with extensive experience in Pacific Northwest surveying. Hayes assembled a team of 6 specialists, 2 additional geologists, 2 cartographers, and 2 field technicians trained in wilderness navigation and equipment maintenance. The survey plan divided the Darrington District into a grid of 64 sections, each measuring approximately 2.5 miles square. The team would systematically examine each section over an 18-month period, establishing temporary base camps and conducting detailed measurements of geological features, soil composition, and mineral content. Work proceeded normally for the first 4 months. Hayes's team completed surveys of 12 sections along the district's southern boundary, documenting the expected mix of volcanic and sedimentary rock formations typical of the North Cascades region. Their findings aligned with existing geological knowledge of the area and presented no unusual features or anomalies. The problems began in July of 1979, when the team moved into the more remote northern sections of their survey grid. On July 15th, field technician Mark Rodriguez discovered the first unexplained survey marker while establishing a measurement baseline in section 27. The marker consisted of a brass disc mounted on a steel rod, driven approximately 18 inches into rocky soil. The disc bore the standard U.S. Geological Survey emblem, but lacked the identification number, date, and survey reference that should have been stamped on all official markers. Rodriguez reported the discovery to Hayes, who assumed the marker had been placed by a previous survey team and simply lacked proper documentation. Hayes checked Forest Service records and found no documentation of any previous surveying activity in Section 27. He contacted the U.S. Geological Survey Office in Seattle to inquire about undocumented markers in the area. The USGS confirmed that they had no record of any survey markers placed in the Darrington District outside of 3 specific locations along established trails. According to their database, no federal agency had conducted detailed surveys in the remote sections where Hayes's team was working. Hayes decided to continue with the planned survey, while documenting any additional unexplained markers they encountered. Over the next 2 weeks, the team found 11 more brass discs in Section 27, all identical to the first. Proper USGS emblems, but no identification markings. The markers appeared to be placed in a deliberate pattern. When Hayes plotted their locations on his survey maps, they formed a precise geometric grid with measurements that corresponded to standard surveying practices. Someone had conducted a professional quality survey of Section 27 using proper equipment and techniques, but had left no official record of the work. On August 3rd, cartographer Linda Chen made a discovery that transformed the mystery from a bureaucratic oversight into something much more disturbing. While conducting measurements in Section 28, Chen found that additional markers had appeared overnight in locations where the team had worked the previous day. Chen had personally surveyed a specific ridgeline on August 2nd, taking detailed measurements and photographs of the terrain. Her notes confirmed that no survey markers had been present at that time. When she returned to the same location on August 3rd to complete her measurements, she found 6 brass discs placed in perfect alignment along the ridge, spaced at exact 100-meter interval. Hayes halted survey operations and called a team meeting to review Chen's findings. The team examined her photographs from August 2nd, which clearly showed the ridgeline without any markers. They compared these images to new photographs taken August 3rd, which documented the mysterious markers in their precise geometric arrangement. The implications were troubling. Someone had accessed their remote survey location, placed professional quality markers using precise measurements, and completed this work during the hours of darkness in difficult mountain terrain. The work required surveying expertise, specialized equipment, and knowledge of the team's daily activities. Hayes reported the situation to the Darrington District Ranger, who authorized an investigation into possible unauthorized activity in the survey area. Forest Service law enforcement interviewed local hiking groups, mining companies, and research organizations that might have legitimate reasons to conduct surveying work in the area. No organization claimed responsibility for placing the markers. The investigation revealed that the mysterious markers were made from materials not used by any current government surveying operation. Chemical analysis showed that the brass contained trace elements consistent with manufacturing techniques used in the 1940s and 50s, decades before modern surveying standards were established. More puzzling, the steel rods supporting the markers showed no signs of recent installation. Soil analysis around the rods indicated they had been in place for at least several years, despite the fact that Chen had photographed their complete absence just 24 hours earlier. Dr. Hayes decided to continue the survey while maintaining careful documentation of any additional marker discoveries. Between August and October of 1979, the team found over 200 unexplained markers scattered across 8 sections of their survey grid. The markers consistently appeared overnight in locations where the team had worked during the previous day. In every case, team members could document through photographs and notes that no markers had been present when they completed their work, yet the markers would be found the following morning in positions that suggested long-term installation. The geometric patterns formed by the markers became increasingly complex as the survey progressed. Hayes realized that the unknown surveyors were not simply duplicating his team's work, but were conducting a completely different survey that intersected with their official project at specific points. By plotting all the discovered markers on a comprehensive map, Hayes found that they outlined geological features that his team had not yet identified: underground water systems, mineral deposits, and rock formations that became apparent only when viewed as part of the larger pattern created by the marker placements. The unknown survey was more sophisticated and comprehensive than the official Forest Service project. Whoever was placing the markers possessed detailed knowledge of the area's geology and was conducting measurements that exceeded the scope of Hayes's federally funded study. On November 12, 1979, Hayes submitted a formal report to Forest Service headquarters recommending suspension of the Darrington District Survey. His report documented the discovery of over 300 unexplained markers and noted that the unknown surveying activity was interfering with his team's ability to conduct accurate measurements. The Forest Service reviewed Hayes's report and consulted with federal law enforcement agencies about the possibility of unauthorized research or commercial activity in the survey area. No evidence was found of any group or organization capable of conducting the sophisticated surveying work documented by Hayes's team. In December of 1979, the Forest Service officially suspended the Darrington District Geological Survey, citing budget constraints and scheduling conflict. The project was not rescheduled, and no comprehensive geological study of the area has been conducted since that time. Hayes was reassigned to a surveying project in the Olympic National Forest. His detailed documentation of the Darrington District markers was filed in Forest Service archives and classified as an incomplete project. The location coordinates of the discovered markers were not included in any official maps or geological databases. Between 1980 and 2010, the Forest Service received occasional reports from hikers and researchers who found brass survey markers in remote areas of the Darrington District. These reports were filed as routine discoveries of historical surveying equipment and were not investigated. In 2011, a comprehensive GPS mapping project, conducted by the University of Washington, documented the precise locations of 147 survey markers throughout the Darrington District. The markers formed geometric patterns that covered approximately 20,000 acres and outlined geological features that had never been officially mapped. The University of Washington attempted to identify the organization responsible for placing the markers, but found no historical records of any surveying project that matched the scope and precision of the discovered work. The markers remain in place, marking the boundaries of a survey that was never officially conducted, documenting geological features according to standards that exceed current federal requirements. Today, the Darrington District remains largely unmapped, except for the mysterious survey markers that continue to appear in precise geometric patterns across the landscape. The brass discs mark progress on a project that has no official existence, guided by expertise that leaves no institutional footprint, measuring a wilderness that seems to survey itself according to standards that no human organization ever established. Some passengers remain in transit long after their destinations have ceased to exist. State Route 20, known as the North Cascades Highway, stretches 145 miles from Burlington in the west to Okanogan in the east, crossing some of the most remote and mountainous terrain in Washington state. The highway's central section passes through North Cascades National Park, climbing to Washington Pass at 5,477 feet before descending into the Methow Valley. Due to heavy snowfall, this section closes each winter from approximately November through April, making it one of the few major highways in the continental United States that operates seasonally. The highway was completed in 1972 after nearly 50 years of intermittent construction through challenging mountain terrain. The project required extensive blasting through granite peaks and the construction of numerous bridges and retaining walls to navigate steep canyon walls and unstable slopes. Several sections of the original route had to be rerouted due to geological instability, creating a final alignment that differs significantly from early survey plans. The town of Concrete sits along the western approach to the highway, approximately 25 miles east of Interstate 5. Named for the Portland cement plant that operated there from 1905 to 1968, Concrete reached its peak population of approximately 1,000 residents during the 1920s. By the time State Route 20 opened, the town had declined to fewer than 400 residents, supported primarily by logging operations and a modest tourism trade from travelers heading into the North Cascades. Concrete's business district consists of a single main street with fewer than 20 commercial establishments, a grocery store, 2 cafes, a hardware store, and several service businesses, catering to logging trucks and recreational vehicles. The town has never supported the type of office buildings or professional services that would employ workers requiring business attire for daily commuting. Yet since 1972, drivers traveling State Route 20 have consistently reported encountering a woman requesting transportation to her office job in Concrete. The first documented report came from David Patterson, a sales representative from Seattle who was driving to a client meeting in Winthrop on September 14, 1972. Patterson's written statement to the State Patrol described encountering a woman hitchhiker approximately 10 miles west of Concrete, near the Rockport State Park entrance. According to Patterson, the woman appeared to be in her 30s, wearing a dark business suit, carrying a briefcase, and standing beside the highway in a professional posture that suggested she was accustomed to commuting by automobile. When Patterson stopped to offer assistance, the woman thanked him politely and explained that she was running late for work at the office in Concrete. Patterson found this explanation puzzling, as he was familiar with Concrete from previous business trips and could not recall any office buildings or professional services in the town. When he asked for clarification about her workplace, the woman provided only vague responses about administrative work and filing reports, without identifying a specific employer or business location. The drive from the pickup location to Concrete should have taken approximately 15 minutes. Patterson noted his odometer reading when he picked up the hitchhiker, 47,212 miles. When he reached Concrete and stopped to let the woman out at the main intersection, his odometer read 47,259 miles, indicating he had driven 47 miles rather than the expected 10 miles. Patterson questioned the odometer reading, assuming he had misread the initial measurement. However, his detailed business records included mileage logs for tax purposes, and the extra 37 miles created a significant discrepancy in his documented travel expenses for the day. When Patterson asked the woman where specifically she would like to be dropped off in Concrete, she thanked him again and simply stepped out of the vehicle at the main intersection. Patterson watched her walk toward the center of town, but lost sight of her when he turned to check for oncoming traffic before pulling back onto the highway. Patterson completed his business in Winthrop and returned through Concrete that evening. He stopped at a local cafe to ask about office buildings or professional services in the town, explaining that he had given a ride to a woman who worked in local administrative offices. The cafe owner and several customers confirmed that Concrete had no office buildings or businesses that would employ administrative workers in business attire. Patterson's experience remained an isolated curiosity until May of 1973, when Barbara Chen, a nurse from Bellingham, encountered what appeared to be the same hitchhiker at a different location along State Route 20. Chen was driving to a hiking destination in the North Cascades when she found a woman in business attire standing beside the highway approximately 5 miles east of Concrete. The woman's appearance and manner matched Patterson's description: professional dress, briefcase, polite demeanor, and a request for transportation to the office in Concrete. Chen agreed to provide the ride and turned around to drive back toward Concrete. Like Patterson, she noted an unusual odometer reading for the return trip. The distance from her pickup location to Concrete should have been 5 miles, but her odometer indicated she had driven 18 miles when she reached the town's main intersection. Chen questioned the woman about the extra distance, but received only polite confusion in response. The woman thanked Chen for the ride and walked away from the vehicle without identifying her specific destination within Concrete. Chen stopped at the same cafe Patterson had visited and asked about office employment opportunities in Concrete. She received the same information. The town had no businesses that would employ office workers or administrative personnel. Between 1973 and 1990, the Washington State Patrol logged 43 similar reports from drivers who had encountered a woman hitchhiker requesting rides to office work in Concrete. Each report described the same individual: business attire, briefcase, professional manner, and requests for transportation to a workplace that did not exist. More troubling, each driver reported the same odometer anomaly. Regardless of where along State Route 20 they encountered the hitchhiker, the actual distance driven to reach Concrete exceeded the geographical distance by factors ranging from 2 to 8 times. Drivers consistently found that trips which should have taken 10 to 15 minutes required 45 minutes to over an hour, with their vehicle's instruments recording distances that made no geographic sense. Dr. Sarah Williams, a psychology professor from Western Washington University, who encountered the hitchhiker in 1988, attempted to document the phenomenon more systematically. Williams was conducting research on rural transportation patterns and was traveling State Route 20 to interview residents in various small communities. Williams encountered the woman approximately 12 miles west of Concrete and agreed to provide transportation. Before beginning the drive, Williams noted her exact location using a portable GPS unit, recorded her odometer reading, and set a stopwatch to measure travel time. The GPS unit malfunctioned during the drive, showing inconsistent location readings that placed Williams's vehicle at various points along State Route 20 simultaneously. Her odometer advanced 53 miles during a trip that should have covered 12 miles. The stopwatch indicated she had driven for 1 hour and 27 minutes to complete a journey that should have taken 15 minutes. Most unsettling, Williams found that the woman seemed unaware of the temporal and spatial distortions occurring during the ride. She maintained casual conversation about routine work activities and expressed normal concern about being late for her office responsibilities, despite the fact that the journey was taking far longer than necessary. When Williams asked specific questions about the woman's work, she received detailed responses about filing systems, report deadlines, and office procedures. However, the woman could not or would not identify her employer, provide a business address, or explain what type of organization required her administrative services. Williams documented her experience in a formal report to the State Patrol and attempted to follow up by researching historical businesses in Concrete that might explain the woman's references to office work. County records showed that several small businesses had operated offices in Concrete during the 1940s and 50s, but all had closed by the early 1960s, approximately a decade before State Route 20 opened. The State Patrol reviewed Williams's report, along with the accumulated documentation from previous encounters. In 1991, they authorized a limited investigation into reports of hitchhiker anomalies along State Route 20. The investigation team interviewed 26 drivers who had reported encounters with the business-attired hitchhiker between 1972 and 1990. Despite the span of nearly 20 years, all witnesses provided remarkably consistent descriptions of the woman's appearance, manner, and requests for transportation. More significantly, the investigation confirmed the odometer anomalies reported by witnesses. The State Patrol obtained vehicle service records from several drivers and verified that their reported mileage readings were consistent with their vehicle's maintenance schedules and fuel consumption patterns. The extra distances recorded during hitchhiker encounters appeared to be genuine rather than measurement errors or false memories. The investigation team attempted to recreate the reported journeys by driving the same routes at similar times of day. Their test drives consistently showed normal distance and time measurements that matched published road atlases and GPS readings. The anomalies appeared to occur only when drivers were providing transportation to the unidentified woman. In 1992, the State Patrol concluded that, while witness reports appeared credible and consistent, no explanation could be determined for the reported spatial and temporal anomalies. The investigation was closed, and no further official study of the phenomenon was conducted. However, reports have continued with remarkable consistency. Between 1993 and 2020, the State Patrol received 157 additional reports of drivers encountering the same hitchhiker, requesting rides to office work in Concrete. The reports follow the established pattern: encounters at various locations along State Route 20, transportation requests to non-existent office employment, and significant odometer and time anomalies during the journeys. Each driver reports normal conversation with a woman who seems unaware that her destination does not exist and that the journey she requests defies the basic geography of the region. Current State Patrol policy treats hitchhiker reports as routine traffic incidents requiring standard documentation, but no investigative follow-up. Officers are advised to log witness statements and provide general safety information about picking up strangers, but not to pursue questions about spatial or temporal anomalies. The woman continues to request rides to her office job in concrete, maintaining a professional schedule that requires commuting to a workplace that has never existed, traveling distances that stretch far beyond the geography they cross. Somewhere along State Route 20, the journey between pickup and destination expands to accommodate a commute that began decades before the highway opened, and continues toward an appointment that can never be kept in a building that was never built. Some collections organize themselves according to readers they have never met. The Centralia Carnegie Library sits on North Pearl Street in downtown Centralia, Washington, a 3-story brick building constructed in 1913 with funding from the Carnegie Foundation's Library Philanthropy Program. The building served the community for 68 years before closing permanently in 1981 due to budget constraints and declining usage. Since its closure, the building has remained vacant, owned by the city, but maintained only to prevent structural deterioration. Centralia itself has struggled economically since the decline of its timber industry in the 1970s. The city's population peaked at approximately 16,000 residents in 1960, but has steadily decreased to fewer than 18,000 today. Downtown Centralia contains numerous vacant buildings, making the abandoned library one of many unused structures, rather than a unique landmark. The Carnegie Library building spans 3 floors, connected by a central staircase, with the main reading room occupying most of the ground floor. When the library closed, most books were donated to other libraries or sold, but several thousand volumes remained on the shelves due to their poor condition or lack of demand. These remaining books cover a typical range of subjects: fiction, local history, outdated reference materials, and children's literature published primarily between 1920 and 1970. The building's interior has deteriorated gradually over 4 decades of abandonment. Windows on the upper floors have been broken by vandals or weather, allowing rain and snow to damage books and furniture in those areas. However, the main reading room on the ground floor remains relatively intact, with most windows still secured and the original wooden shelving still functional. City officials conduct periodic inspections of the building to assess structural integrity and security, but these visits are infrequent and brief. The building is not officially open to the public, but urban explorers and local teenagers occasionally gain access through unlocked windows or doors that have been damaged by weather. It was during one of these unofficial visits that the library's unusual properties were first documented. On October 12, 2007, 3 members of a local urban exploration group entered the Carnegie Library to photograph the abandoned interior for a documentation project about Centralia's architectural history. The group consisted of Michael Torres, a freelance photographer from Olympia, Jessica Reynolds, a graphic designer from Centralia, and David Kim, a college student studying historic preservation at the University of Washington. The group spent approximately 2 hours photographing the main reading room, focusing on the deteriorated condition of books and furniture. Torres used a digital camera to document the arrangement of books on various shelves, planning to create a photo essay about the decline of small-town libraries. While reviewing his photographs later that evening, Torres noticed something unusual in several images of the main fiction section. Books on one particular shelf appeared to be arranged so that the first letters of their titles read from left to right, spelled out Michael Torres Photographer. Torres initially assumed this was a coincidence. The shelf contained approximately 30 books, making it statistically possible for their titles to randomly form recognizable words. However, when he examined additional photographs of other shelves, he found similar patterns. Books on the local history shelf spelled Jessica Reynolds' design, and books on the children's section formed David Kim's student preservation. Each arrangement used books that were already present on the shelves, but the books appeared to have been organized specifically to spell out the names and occupations of the three visitors. Torres checked his earlier photographs of the same shelves and found that the books had been in different arrangements when the group first entered the library. Torres shared his photographs with Reynolds and Kim, who confirmed that they had not rearranged any books during their visit. The group decided to return to the library the following week to investigate the phenomenon more systematically. On October 19th, the same three explorers returned to the Carnegie Library with additional equipment, multiple cameras, flashlights, and a notebook to document their findings. They photographed each shelf in the main reading room before beginning their exploration, then spent 1 hour examining the building without touching any books. When they returned to photograph the shelves again, they found that books had been rearranged on 12 different shelves throughout the main reading room. Each arrangement spelled out personal information about one of the three visitors: full names, occupations, hometown, and in David Kim's case, his specific area of academic study. The rearrangements were more complex than the previous week's discoveries. Books were organized not only to spell words using their first letters, but also to create readable sentences. One shelf in the reference section spelled Michael from Olympia, takes pictures of old buildings. Another shelf formed Jessica grew up on Centralia West Side. Most unsettling, some of the spelled out information was personal knowledge that the visitors had not shared with each other. Kim found books arranged to spell David fears commitment issues with Sarah, referring to relationship concerns he had not discussed with Torres or Reynolds and had shared only with close friends. The group documented their findings with detailed photographs and returned to Centralia the following day to report their experience to city officials. They met with the city manager, who listened to their account, but expressed skepticism about books rearranging themselves to spell personal information. The city manager agreed to have the building inspected for evidence of unauthorized access or vandalism. The inspection found no signs of forced entry, security system activation, or disturbance beyond the book arrangements documented by the exploration group. Word of the discovery spread through online urban exploration communities, attracting additional visitors to the Carnegie Library. Between November of 2007 and March of 2008, at least 15 different individuals or groups documented similar experiences with books rearranging to spell personal information. Each visitor found different arrangements that appeared to be customized to their specific identities and circumstances. Dr. Patricia Chen, a psychology professor from Evergreen State College who visited in December, found books spelling Patricia studies human behavior and teaches Tuesdays. 2 high school students from Centralia discovered arrangements that included their class schedules and part-time job locations. The personal information spelled out by the book arrangements was consistently accurate but varied in its level of detail. Some arrangements included only basic biographical facts that could be obtained from public records or social media profiles. Others contained private information that the visitors claimed to have shared only with family members or close friends. Dr. Chen attempted to conduct a more systematic study of the phenomenon in early 2008. She organized visits by volunteers who agreed to document their experiences for research purposes. Each volunteer was asked to spend 1 hour in the library, while Chen photographed book arrangements before and after their visit. Chen's study included 12 participants over a 6-week period. In every case, books rearranged themselves to spell personal information about the visitor. The accuracy of the information was verified through interviews with participants, and in each case, the spelled-out facts were confirmed to be correct. Chen attempted to install a motion-activated camera to record the actual rearrangement process, but the camera malfunctioned repeatedly. Digital cameras, video equipment, and even simple mechanical devices failed to function properly when left unattended in the library. Equipment worked normally when operated by human visitors, but consistently failed when used for automated monitoring. Chen submitted her findings to the Journal of Anomalous Phenomena, a peer-reviewed publication that specializes in unexplained events. Her paper was accepted for publication, but was later withdrawn when the journal's editorial board determined that the reported phenomena could not be adequately verified through standard scientific methods. In April of 2008, the city of Centralia installed new security measures at the Carnegie Library, including reinforced locks and boarding over accessible windows. City officials cited concerns about liability and property damage from unauthorized visitors. However, the new security measures have not prevented continued reports of book rearrangements. Urban explorers who gain access to the building continue to document personalized arrangements of books that spell out accurate information about their identities and circumstances. The most recent documented case occurred in September of 2023, when a documentary film crew investigating abandoned buildings in Washington state gained authorized access to the Carnegie Library for a historical preservation project. The crew found books arranged to spell the names and job titles of all 4 team members, along with the title of their documentary project, which had not been finalized or announced publicly at the time of their visit. The film crew's equipment functioned normally during their visit, but recorded footage of the book arrangements showed only empty shelves when reviewed later. Still photographs captured the arrangements clearly, but video recordings consistently showed the shelves in their original, disorganized state. Current city policy prohibits public access to the Carnegie Library building, and security checks are conducted monthly to ensure the building remains secure. City inspectors report that books continue to be found in various arrangements on the shelves, but these findings are documented only as routine maintenance observations. The Centralia Carnegie Library remains vacant and deteriorating, its collection reduced to a few thousand damaged volumes that serve no official purpose. Yet the books continue to organize themselves into messages for readers who should not be there, spelling out secrets about visitors who never borrowed anything, arranging information in a circulation system that operates according to rules no librarian ever established. Somewhere among the abandoned stacks, a catalog updates itself with details about patrons who will never return the knowledge they have accidentally borrowed, maintaining a collection that reads its readers more carefully than they have ever read its books. Some storms announce themselves long before the sky knows they are coming. Blue Mountain Observatory sits at 4,150 feet elevation on the crest of the Blue Mountains in southeastern Washington state, approximately 30 miles southeast of Walla Walla. Established in 1968 by the University of Washington Department of Atmospheric Sciences, the facility operates as both an astronomical observatory and a high-altitude weather monitoring station. The location was chosen for its clear skies, minimal light pollution, and elevation that places it above much of the regional atmospheric turbulence. The observatory complex consists of 3 buildings: a main telescope facility, a support building, housing, computers and communications equipment, and a separate meteorological station that operates independently of the astronomical research. The weather station monitors standard atmospheric conditions, including temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, wind speed and direction, and precipitation levels. Data is transmitted hourly to the National Weather Service Regional Office in Spokane via satellite uplink. The Blue Mountains themselves are an isolated range that rises abruptly from the surrounding wheat country of the Columbia Plateau. The mountains create their own weather patterns, often experiencing storms and atmospheric conditions that differ significantly from weather in the valleys below. This microclimate effect makes the Blue Mountain Observatory valuable for understanding how elevation and topography influence regional weather systems. The weather station's instruments are maintained by the National Weather Service according to standard protocols. Equipment is calibrated monthly and replaced according to manufacturer specifications. The station's data feeds into regional weather models, used to generate forecasts for eastern Washington and western Idaho. For 37 years, the Blue Mountain Observatory Weather Station has provided reliable meteorological data with only minor equipment malfunctions and occasional data transmission errors. The station's records show no significant anomalies or unexplained readings that would suggest instrument problems or environmental interference. This changed on March 15, 2005, when Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a climatologist from Washington State University, discovered a pattern in the observatory's data that should not have existed. Rodriguez was analyzing long-term weather trends in southeastern Washington for a study on climate change impacts in agricultural regions. Her research required detailed examination of daily weather data from multiple stations across the region, including the Blue Mountain Observatory. While comparing data sets from different locations, Rodriguez noticed that the Blue Mountain Station periodically recorded atmospheric readings that were inconsistent with weather patterns documented by surrounding stations. The anomalous readings occurred every 127 days, with remarkable precision. On these dates, instruments at Blue Mountain Observatory recorded atmospheric conditions that did not match any known weather phenomena. Barometric pressure readings that oscillated in patterns never observed in natural weather systems, humidity measurements that remained constant despite changing temperatures, and wind patterns that suggested circular air movement at altitudes where such formations do not occur. Rodriguez initially assumed the anomalous readings indicated equipment malfunctions. However, when she examined the timing of these events, she discovered something more puzzling. The dates of anomalous readings corresponded precisely to major weather events that occurred in the region exactly 6 months later. The March 15, 2005 reading showed atmospheric conditions unlike anything in meteorological literature. 6 months later, on September 15, 2005, eastern Washington experienced an unusual late-season thunderstorm system that meteorologists had been unable to predict using standard forecasting models. The storm's characteristics matched several of the anomalous measurements recorded at Blue Mountain Observatory 6 months earlier. Rodriguez expanded her analysis to include 5 years of Blue Mountain Observatory data. She found that every 127-day cycle produced readings that accurately predicted major weather events 6 months in advance. Droughts, floods, severe storms, and temperature extremes were all preceded by corresponding anomalous readings at the exact intervals. The predictive accuracy was far beyond what should be possible using current atmospheric science. Weather forecasting typically becomes unreliable beyond 7 to 10 days due to the chaotic nature of atmospheric systems. The idea that instruments could detect weather patterns 6 months in advance contradicted fundamental principles of meteorology. Rodriguez contacted Dr. Michael Chen, the National Weather Service meteorologist responsible for maintaining the Blue Mountain Observatory Station. Chen reviewed Rodriguez's findings and confirmed that the anomalous readings were present in official Weather Service records. However, Chen had not previously noticed the pattern because the readings were classified as equipment errors and excluded from routine data analysis. Chen arranged for a comprehensive inspection of the Blue Mountain Observatory Weather Station in June of 2005. The inspection team included National Weather Service technicians, equipment manufacturers' representatives, and independent contractors specializing in meteorological instruments. The inspection found that all weather monitoring equipment at Blue Mountain Observatory was functioning within normal parameters. Instruments were properly calibrated, data transmission systems operated correctly, and environmental conditions at the station showed no factors that would cause measurement errors. However, the inspection team was present during one of the 127-day anomalous reading events on June 23, 2005. They observed instruments recording the same impossible atmospheric conditions that Rodriguez had documented in historical data. Barometric pressure measurements fluctuated in patterns that defied known atmospheric physics. Temperature readings showed variations that should have been accompanied by observable weather phenomena, yet skies remained clear and wind conditions were calm. Most puzzling, the instruments appeared to be measuring atmospheric conditions that were not present at the observatory location. Weather balloons launched during the anomalous reading period confirmed that actual atmospheric conditions differed significantly from what the station instruments were recording. The inspection team recommended replacing all weather monitoring equipment at Blue Mountain Observatory to eliminate the possibility of synchronized equipment malfunction. In August of 2005, the National Weather Service installed completely new instruments manufactured by different companies and using different measurement technologies. The first 127-day cycle after the equipment replacement occurred on November 18, 2005. The new instruments recorded identical anomalous readings to those documented by the previous equipment. The readings predicted severe winter weather for eastern Washington, which occurred exactly 6 months later during an unprecedented May snowstorm in 2006. Dr. Rodriguez published her findings in the Journal of Applied Meteorology in early 2006. Her paper documented the 127-day cycle, the 6-month predictive accuracy, and the equipment replacement that had failed to eliminate the anomalous readings. The paper attracted attention from meteorologists and atmospheric scientists across the country. Several research teams attempted to replicate Rodriguez's analysis using data from other high-altitude weather stations in the Pacific Northwest. None found similar patterns of anomalous readings or predictive accuracy at other locations. Dr. Sarah Williams from the National Center for Atmospheric Research visited Blue Mountain Observatory in March of 2006 to conduct an independent study of the phenomenon. Williams brought sophisticated atmospheric monitoring equipment designed to detect environmental factors that might influence standard weather instruments. Williams's equipment recorded no environmental anomalies during her 2-week study period. Electromagnetic fields, atmospheric ionization, and seismic activity were all within normal ranges. However, Williams was present during the March 17, 2006 anomalous reading event and confirmed that station instruments recorded impossible atmospheric conditions, while her independent equipment showed normal readings. Williams concluded that the Blue Mountain Observatory weather station was somehow measuring atmospheric conditions that existed at a different time or location. She could not determine the source of these readings or explain how instruments could detect weather patterns 6 months in advance. The National Weather Service reviewed Williams's report and the accumulated documentation from Rodriguez and Chen. In July of 2006, the service issued a technical bulletin acknowledging that Blue Mountain Observatory produced anomalous readings on a regular cycle, but stating that these readings were excluded from operational weather forecasting due to their inconsistency with established meteorological principles. The bulletin noted that while the readings appeared to have predictive value, the National Weather Service could not incorporate data that contradicted fundamental atmospheric science into official forecasts. The station would continue operating for research purposes, but its anomalous readings would not be used for public weather prediction. Between 2006 and 2020, the 127-day cycle at Blue Mountain Observatory continued with mechanical precision. Every anomalous reading event accurately predicted major weather patterns 6 months later. Researchers documented the phenomenon but found no scientific explanation for instruments that could measure future atmospheric conditions. The most recent documented anomalous reading occurred on January 8, 2024. The readings suggested that eastern Washington would experience an unprecedented heat wave during July of 2024. Weather Service records confirm that the region experienced record-breaking temperatures during the predicted timeframe, following patterns that matched the January readings in remarkable detail. Current National Weather Service policy treats Blue Mountain Observatory as a research facility rather than an operational weather station. The anomalous readings are documented, but not included in official forecasts or climate models. Station data is shared with university researchers studying unexplained atmospheric phenomena, but is not used for public weather prediction. The 127-day cycle continues to operate with clockwork precision. Somewhere in the thin air above the Blue Mountains, instruments measure storms that have not yet formed, recording the atmospheric signature of weather that will not arrive for 6 months, maintaining a schedule that no meteorologist understands, and serving a purpose that no science can explain. The weather station keeps its own calendar now, marking time according to atmospheric events that exist in a future no forecast can reach, predicting tomorrow's storms with an accuracy that makes today's meteorology seem like guesswork, practiced by those who have forgotten how to read the sky. Some routes continue to carry passengers long after the last scheduled departure. Puget Sound stretches 100 miles from Olympia north to the Canadian border, containing over 700 miles of saltwater shoreline divided among dozens of islands, peninsulas, and inlets. The Washington State Ferry System operates the largest ferry network in the United States, with 21 vessels serving 10 routes that connect island communities to the mainland. The system carries over 24 million passengers annually across waters that can be treacherous during winter storms, but typically provide calm passage during summer months. The Vashon Island route represents one of the ferry system's most heavily traveled connections, linking the rural island community of approximately 11,000 residents to both Seattle and the Kitsap Peninsula. 3 ferries operate on this route: the MV Tillicum, MV Issaquah, and MV South, providing service every 15 to 30 minutes during peak hours. The route covers approximately 4 miles of open water between Vashon Island's north end and the Fauntleroy Terminal in West Seattle. Ferry operations in Puget Sound are coordinated through the Vessel Traffic Service, a Coast Guard facility that monitors all commercial shipping in the region using radar, radio communications, and automatic identification systems. Every ferry in the Washington State Fleet carries transponders that continuously broadcast vessel identity, position, speed, and heading to traffic control systems. This monitoring ensures safe navigation in waters that can accommodate both small recreational boats and large cargo ships simultaneously. The current Vashon Island route has operated continuously since 1951, though ferry service to the island dates back to 1916, when private companies provided passenger and vehicle transportation using smaller vessels. The route has been modified several times to accommodate larger ferries and changing traffic patterns, but the basic crossing between Vashon Island and West Seattle has remained consistent for over 70 years. What makes the Vashon route unusual among Puget Sound ferry services is not its operational history or passenger volume, but the additional vessel that regularly appears to operate on a schedule that was abandoned 60 years ago. The first documented sighting of the Phantom Ferry occurred on August 27, 1994. Captain Robert Martinez was piloting the MV Tillicum on the evening run from Vashon Island to Fauntleroy, when passengers on the upper deck reported seeing another Washington State ferry approximately half a mile to the south, running parallel to their route. According to passenger statements collected by ferry crew, the other vessel appeared to be an older ferry design, similar to ferries that had operated in Puget Sound during the 1950s and 60s. The vessel showed full lighting, including navigation lights, deck illumination, and interior cabin lighting, that suggested it was carrying a normal passenger load. Captain Martinez checked his radio communications and contacted Vessel Traffic Service to inquire about other ferry traffic in the area. Traffic control confirmed that no other ferries were scheduled to be operating near the Vashon route at that time. Radar showed only the MV Tillicum in the reported area. Martinez and his crew observed the Phantom Ferry for approximately 12 minutes as both vessels proceeded north toward their respective terminals. The unknown ferry maintained a steady course and speed consistent with normal ferry operations, showing no signs of distress or unusual behavior. The mystery ferry disappeared from view when the MV Tillicum rounded Point Vashon and entered the final approach to Fauntleroy Terminal. When Martinez checked with terminal staff at both Fauntleroy and the Vashon Island dock, no other ferry had arrived or was expected to arrive during that time period. Martinez filed an incident report with Washington State Ferries Operations, noting the passenger reports and his own observations of an unidentified vessel operating in ferry traffic lanes. The report was forwarded to the Coast Guard for investigation. Coast Guard review of radar data from August 27th found no evidence of any vessel operating in the area where passengers and crew had observed the Phantom Ferry. Marine traffic control systems showed only the MV Tillicum and several small recreational boats during the time period in question. The incident remained an isolated curiosity until October 15, 1994, when passengers on the MV Issaquah reported seeing the same Phantom Ferry during an evening crossing from Fauntleroy to Vashon Island. This sighting was witnessed by approximately 30 passengers and documented by crew members, including Captain Linda Chen and First Officer David Patterson. The Phantom Ferry appeared approximately 600 yards to the east of the MV Issaquah, traveling south toward what appeared to be a destination on the west side of Vashon Island. Captain Chen noted that the mystery ferry's route did not correspond to any current ferry service in Puget Sound. The vessel appeared to be heading toward the area near Burton, a small community on Vashon Island's east shore that had not been served by ferry service since 1963. Chen contacted Vessel Traffic Service during the sighting and was again informed that no other ferries were operating in the area. She requested permission to alter course to investigate the unknown vessel, but before she could change heading, the Phantom Ferry disappeared from view. Between October 1994 and March 1995, ferry passengers and crew reported 8 additional sightings of the mystery vessel. Each sighting occurred during evening hours and involved the same type of older design ferry traveling routes that did not match current ferry schedules or destinations. Dr. Margaret Walsh, a maritime historian from the University of Washington, became interested in the reports after reading about them in local newspapers. Walsh researched historical ferry routes in Puget Sound and discovered that the Phantom Ferry's apparent destinations corresponded to ferry terminals that had operated during the 1950s and early 60s. The Burton Terminal on Vashon Island had provided ferry service from 1928 to 1963, when it was closed due to declining ridership and the consolidation of island ferry service at the current North End Terminal. The Phantom Ferry appeared to be following the old Burton route, which had connected the east side of Vashon Island directly to terminals in West Seattle and on the Kitsap Peninsula. Walsh contacted Washington State Ferries to request access to historical vessel records and route schedules from the 1950s and 60s. Her research revealed that the Phantom Ferry's appearance and route matched the MV Kalakala, a distinctive Art Deco ferry that had operated the Burton route until the terminal's closure in 1963. The MV Kalakala was scrapped in 1993, 1 year before the first Phantom Ferry sightings began. The vessel had been a popular symbol of Puget Sound transportation for over 50 years before being retired and eventually dismantled due to deteriorating condition and high maintenance costs. Walsh published her findings in the journal Pacific Northwest Quarterly in spring of 1995. Her article documented the correlation between Phantom Ferry sightings and the historical Burton route, suggesting that witnesses were observing some form of residual maritime activity related to the discontinued service. Walsh's publication attracted attention from other researchers and increased public interest in the Phantom Ferry phenomenon. Between 1995 and 2000, documented sightings increased to an average of 6 per year, with reports coming from ferry passengers, crew members, and recreational boaters in the central Puget Sound area. The Washington State Ferry System commissioned a formal study of the Phantom Ferry reports in 2001. The study team included marine safety experts, radar technicians, and psychological researchers. tasked with determining whether the sightings represented genuine maritime safety concerns or perceptual phenomena. The study confirmed that phantom ferry sightings occurred consistently during specific environmental conditions: calm seas, clear visibility, and tidal conditions that matched optimal departure times for the historical Burton route. No sightings had been reported during rough weather or poor visibility conditions. Most significantly, the study found that phantom ferry sightings occurred only during tide levels that would have been suitable for ferry operations at the old Burton terminal. The terminal had been built to accommodate ferries during specific tidal windows, and historical records showed that the Burton route operated only during certain tide conditions that allowed safe docking at the shallow water terminal. The study team attempted to recreate sighting conditions by positioning observation teams at multiple locations during predicted optimal viewing times. Over a 6-month period, research teams documented 12 phantom ferry sightings that were observed simultaneously from multiple locations and photographed using telephoto lenses. Photographs showed what appeared to be a ferry-like vessel, with period-appropriate lighting and design features consistent with 1950s ferry technology. However, when the photographs were analyzed by maritime experts, they found several anomalies that suggested the images did not show a physical vessel. The phantom ferry appeared to be translucent in some photographs, with background shoreline features visible through the vessel's superstructure. Water displacement patterns around the ferry did not match what would be expected from a vessel of its apparent size and speed. Most puzzling, the phantom ferry's lighting appeared to be electrical systems from the 1950s, including incandescent bulbs and fixture designs that had not been used on ferries for decades. The lighting patterns exactly matched historical photographs of the MV Kalakala taken during its operational period. The Washington State Ferry study concluded that while multiple credible witnesses had documented consistent sightings of an apparent ferry vessel, no evidence supported the existence of any physical vessel operating in the reported locations. The study recommended continued monitoring of the phenomenon, but noted that phantom ferry sightings posed no safety risks to current ferry operations. Sightings have continued with remarkable consistency since the 2001 study. Between 2002 and 2023, ferry passengers and crew have reported 97 documented encounters with the phantom ferry, always following the same pattern: evening departures during optimal tide conditions, routes matching the historical Burton service, and vessel characteristics consistent with 1950s ferry design. Current Washington State ferry policy treats phantom ferry reports as routine maritime observations, requiring standard documentation, but no operational response. Ferry crews are advised to log sightings and report them to Marine Traffic Control, but not to alter course or schedules based on phantom vessel observations. The phantom ferry continues to maintain its schedule 60 years after the last official departure from Burton Terminal. Somewhere in the evening waters of Puget Sound, passengers still board a ferry that no longer exists, traveling to a terminal that was demolished decades ago, keeping appointments that were canceled when the world moved on to more efficient routes. The ghost ferry sails its remembered waters, carrying the echoes of commuters who once depended on a service that time made obsolete, following a schedule that exists only in the memory of tides that still rise and fall according to the needs of passengers who no longer need to get home. Some schedules are written in futures that have not yet arrived. The town of Concrete sits in the Skagit River Valley of northwestern Washington, surrounded by the steep, forested slopes of the North Cascade Mountains. Founded in 1905 around a Portland cement plant, the town reached its peak population of approximately 1,000 residents during the 1920s, before beginning a steady decline as industrial operations moved elsewhere. Today, fewer than 700 people live in Concrete, making it one of the smaller incorporated communities in Skagit County. The town's medical clinic operated from 1938 to 1987 in a two-story wood frame building on Main Street, providing basic healthcare services to residents of Concrete and surrounding rural areas. Dr. William Harrison established the practice and ran it for 34 years before retiring in 1972. Dr. Margaret Chen took over the practice and operated it for an additional 15 years until her own retirement forced the clinic's closure in 1987. When the clinic closed, most medical records were transferred to healthcare facilities in Mount Vernon and Sedro-Woolley, but office furniture and administrative materials were left in the building. The structure has remained vacant since 1987, owned by the city, but not maintained beyond basic structural repairs needed to prevent collapse. Urban explorers and local teenagers occasionally enter the building through unlocked doors or broken windows. The building's interior preserves much of its original medical clinic atmosphere. The ground floor contains a waiting room with chairs arranged around a coffee table, an examination room with medical equipment dating to the 1970s, and a small office space behind the reception desk. The second floor houses what was once Dr. Chen's private office and a storage room for medical supplies and records. It was in the second-floor office that urban explorers made discoveries that should not have been possible. On June 8, 2012, 3 members of an urban exploration group from Seattle entered the abandoned clinic to document its deteriorated condition for a photography project about rural healthcare decline. The group consisted of Amanda Roberts, a freelance photographer, Kevin Martinez, a graphic designer, and Lisa Wong, a journalism student from the University of Washington. The group spent approximately 2 hours photographing the ground floor before accessing the second-floor office. The office contained a large wooden desk, filing cabinets, and bookcases filled with outdated medical textbooks. On the desk, Roberts discovered several appointment books dating from the 1980s, apparently left behind when Dr. Chen closed her practice. Roberts initially planned to photograph the appointment books as examples of vintage medical record-keeping. However, when she opened the books to examine their contents, she found entries that made no chronological sense. The appointment books were standard commercial planners designed for medical practices, with spaces for scheduling patient visits by date and time. Dr. Chen had filled the books systematically through 1987, with the final entries dated in October of that year when the clinic closed. However, the books also contained appointments scheduled for dates years into the future: 1995, 2003, 2010, and as far ahead as 2025. These future appointments were written in handwriting that did not match Dr. Chen's entries from the 1980s. More disturbing, the future appointments listed real people from the Concrete area, along with specific medical conditions. Roberts recognized several names as current residents of Concrete and nearby communities. The appointments detailed medical issues like John Patterson, diabetes consultation, scheduled for March 2015, and Sarah Miller, cardiac screening scheduled for August 2018. Roberts photographed several pages of the appointment books and shared them with Martinez and Wong. The group decided to investigate whether the named individuals actually lived in the area and whether the scheduled medical conditions had any basis in reality. Using online directories and social media, the group confirmed that most of the names in the future appointments corresponded to real people living in the Concrete area. John Patterson owned a hardware store in town. Sarah Miller worked as a school bus driver for the local district. At least 12 other names could be matched to current residents of Concrete and surrounding communities. Wong, who had journalism training, decided to follow up by contacting some of the individuals named in the appointment books. She called Patterson's hardware store and spoke with him directly, explaining that she was researching the history of healthcare in rural communities. During their conversation, Wong learned that Patterson had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in March of 2015, exactly when the appointment book had scheduled his diabetes consultation. Patterson confirmed that he had never been a patient at the old concrete medical clinic, which had closed when he was still a teenager. Wong contacted Sarah Miller and discovered that Miller had undergone cardiac screening in August of 2018, following chest pains that had concerned her family doctor. Miller had no connection to the abandoned clinic and was puzzled by Wong's questions about appointment books that had apparently predicted her medical issues 7 years before they occurred. Over the following weeks, Wong systematically contacted 18 individuals whose names appeared in the future appointment sections of the books. In 16 cases, she found that the predicted medical conditions had either already occurred at the scheduled times or were currently being treated by the individual's healthcare providers. The accuracy of the medical predictions was remarkable. The appointment books had not only correctly identified future patients, but had also specified the timing and nature of medical conditions that would develop years later. The conditions ranged from common issues like diabetes and hypertension to more specific problems like kidney stones and thyroid disorders. Wong compiled her findings into a report that she submitted to her journalism instructor at the University of Washington. The instructor, Dr. Robert Chen, was initially skeptical, but agreed to review Wong's documentation and photographs of the appointment books. Dr. Chen contacted the Washington State Department of Health to inquire about the abandoned clinic and its records. The department confirmed that the concrete medical clinic had operated under proper licensing through 1987, and that Dr. Margaret Chen had transferred all active patient records to other healthcare providers when she closed the practice. However, the department had no record of Dr. Chen maintaining appointment books beyond the clinic's closure date. When contacted for comment, Dr. Chen, who was living in retirement in Bellingham, stated that she had no memory of scheduling future appointments beyond her planned retirement in 1987. Dr. Chen agreed to examine photographs of the appointment books and confirmed that the handwriting in entries through 1987 matched her own record-keeping style. However, she stated that the future appointments were written in handwriting she did not recognize and included information about medical conditions that she had no way of predicting. The University of Washington Journalism Department decided to conduct a more systematic investigation of the appointment book phenomenon. Dr. Class. Robert Chen organized a research team that included medical professionals, handwriting experts, and statisticians to evaluate the claims about predictive medical appointments. The research team returned to the abandoned clinic in November of 2012 and discovered that the appointment books contained even more future entries than Wong had initially documented. Additional appointments had been added for dates extending through 2030, all written in the same unidentified handwriting that had filled the post-1987 entries. Handwriting analysis confirmed that at least 3 different individuals had contributed to the future appointment entries. None of the handwriting matched samples from Dr. Chen or Dr. Klaus Harrison, the clinic's previous operators. The writing appeared to have been added over an extended period, with some entries showing signs of aging that suggested they had been written years before their discovery. The research team attempted to determine how unknown individuals had gained access to the abandoned clinic and why they would create fictional medical appointments for real community members. Security around the building was minimal, making unauthorized access relatively easy, but the motivation for creating elaborate fake medical records remained unclear. More troubling, follow-up interviews with community members confirmed that the medical predictions in the appointment books continued to prove accurate. Individuals scheduled for future medical issues developed those conditions within the timeframes specified in the books, often requiring the exact types of treatment that the appointments had indicated. The statistical analysis conducted by the research team found that the accuracy rate of medical predictions in the appointment books was far beyond what could be expected from random chance. The predictions demonstrated knowledge of individual health risks and genetic predispositions that would typically require extensive medical testing and family history analysis. In January of 2013, the research team submitted their findings to the Journal of Medical Ethics, requesting peer review of their documentation of the predictive appointment phenomenon. The journal declined to publish the findings, citing concerns about patient privacy and the inability to verify the authenticity of the reported medical predictions through standard research protocols. The City of Concrete installed new locks and security measures on the abandoned clinic building in March of 2013, citing concerns about unauthorized access and potential liability issues. However, urban explorers who have gained access to the building since that time report that new appointments continue to be added to the books. Current appointments now extend through 2040, listing residents of the concrete area who will apparently require medical attention for conditions they have not yet developed. The handwriting continues to show multiple contributors, suggesting that unknown individuals still access the building regularly to maintain the appointment schedule. Local healthcare providers in Mount Vernon and Cedro Woolley, who now serve the concrete area, I report that they occasionally receive patients whose medical conditions match predictions found in photographs of the appointment books. However, medical ethics prevent them from discussing specific cases or confirming the accuracy of individual predictions. The appointment books remain in the abandoned clinic, documenting a medical practice that has been closed for over 35 years, but continues to schedule patients for treatments they will need in futures they have not yet lived. Somewhere in the deteriorating building, appointments are still being made by practitioners who do not exist, for patients who do not know they will need care, maintaining a schedule that serves a community across time in ways that no living doctor has ever attempted. The clinic keeps its own calendar now, marking medical futures with the precision of diagnoses that arrive exactly when predicted, written by hands that understand illness before it develops, and schedule healing for times that have not yet arrived. Some broadcasts begin before anyone turns on the radio. Rialto Beach stretches along the Pacific coast within Olympic National Park, accessible via a short trail from the Mora campground approximately 14 miles west of Forks, Washington. The beach extends for over a mile of rocky coastline, dominated by sea stacks, driftwood logs, and tide pools that attract thousands of visitors annually. The area receives heavy rainfall year-round, creating dense, temperate rainforest that extends almost to the shoreline, where Sitka spruce and western red cedar give way to sandy beaches and rocky outcrops. The Olympic Peninsula's western coast has long been noted for unusual radio reception conditions. The region's proximity to the Pacific Ocean, combined with dense forest cover and frequent atmospheric moisture, creates electromagnetic environments that can enhance or distort radio transmissions in unpredictable ways. Amateur radio operators have documented signal propagation anomalies along the coast since the 1930s, including the ability to receive distant stations with unusual clarity during certain weather conditions. Rialto Beach itself sits at the mouth of the Quileute River, where freshwater meets saltwater in a mixing zone that creates unique electromagnetic properties. The beach's orientation faces directly west toward the Pacific, making it an ideal location for receiving long-distance radio transmissions from across the ocean. However, the area has no permanent residents and no authorized radio broadcasting facilities within 50 miles. The isolated nature of Rialto Beach means that most radio activity in the area comes from visitors using portable radios, marine band communications from fishing vessels offshore, or amateur radio operators conducting field experiments. Park Service regulations prohibit commercial broadcasting within Olympic National Park boundaries, and the Federal Communications Commission maintains no licensed transmitters in the immediate area. This regulatory clarity makes the mysterious broadcasts that began appearing on AM radio frequencies in the area particularly puzzling. The first documented report of anomalous radio transmissions at Rialto Beach came from Dr. Patricia Williams, an electrical engineering professor from the University of Washington, who was conducting atmospheric research in Olympic National Park during July of 2008. Williams was using portable radio equipment to monitor electromagnetic conditions during different weather patterns when she encountered a transmission that should not have existed. On July 19th, Williams was testing radio reception conditions during low tide when her equipment began receiving a clear AM signal on 1,200 kilohertz. The transmission consisted of a male voice speaking in a flat, monotone delivery that provided detailed information about Williams's personal life and research activities. The voice described Williams's childhood home in Spokane, including the address and details about the family garden that she had not shared with anyone during her Olympic Peninsula research trip. The transmission included accurate information about her university office location, her current research funding sources, and the specific equipment she was using during her fieldwork. Most unsettling, the voice described conversations Williams had conducted earlier that day with Park Service rangers, including exact quotations from discussions she had held in private settings where no recording equipment was present. The transmission lasted approximately 12 minutes before fading to static. Williams attempted to determine the source of the transmission by using directional antenna equipment to trace the signal's origin. Her measurements indicated that the transmission was coming from the immediate Rialto Beach area, apparently originating from a point approximately 200 yards offshore, where no vessels or equipment were visible. Williams documented the incident in her research notes and reported the unauthorized transmission to the Federal Communications Commission field office in Seattle. The FCC reviewed her report and conducted a preliminary investigation that found no licensed or unlicensed broadcasting equipment operating in the Rialto Beach area. The incident remained isolated until September of 2008, when amateur radio operator Robert Martinez encountered similar transmissions during a weekend camping trip to Olympic National Park. Martinez, who held an advanced amateur radio license and operated a small electronics repair business in Port Angeles, was familiar with normal radio conditions along the Olympic coast. Martinez was monitoring AM frequencies during the evening of September 14th when he received a transmission on 1,400 kilohertz that began broadcasting personal information about his family and business activities. The voice, which Martinez described as identical to the one Williams had documented, provided details about Martinez's work schedule, his wife's medical appointments, and conversations he had held with customers earlier that week. The transmission included information that Martinez was certain he had not shared with anyone outside his immediate family, including details about financial concerns and personal relationships that he considered strictly private. The voice spoke continuously for 18 minutes, providing an apparently comprehensive summary of Martinez's recent activities and concerns. Martinez attempted to respond to the transmission using his amateur radio equipment, but received no acknowledgement. The mysterious broadcast ended abruptly, and no further transmissions were detected during the remainder of his camping trip. Martinez filed a report with the Federal Communications Commission and contacted Dr. Williams after learning about her similar experience through amateur radio networks. Comparison of their documentation revealed that both had received transmissions in the same monotone male voice that provided accurate personal information without any apparent source. Between October of 2008 and March of 2009, 6 additional cases of mysterious personal broadcasts were reported by visitors to Rialto Beach. Each incident followed the same pattern: AM radio transmissions that provided detailed personal information about the listener, delivered in the same emotionless male voice, with no identifiable broadcasting source. The reports came from diverse sources: a family from Seattle on a weekend camping trip, a wildlife photographer documenting coastal birds, 2 college students conducting a marine biology project, and a retired couple touring the Olympic Peninsula. None of the witnesses knew about previous incidents, yet their descriptions of the transmissions were remarkably consistent. Dr. James Chen, a communications specialist from Western Washington University, became interested in the reports after reading about them in amateur radio publications. Chen organized a formal investigation in April of 2009, bringing sophisticated radio direction-finding equipment to Rialto Beach during a weekend when atmospheric conditions were similar to those reported during previous incidents. Chen's team included graduate students in electrical engineering and professional radio technicians with experience in signal analysis and electromagnetic research. They positioned monitoring equipment at multiple locations around Rialto Beach and conducted systematic sweeps of AM radio frequencies during low tide periods when previous transmissions had been reported. On April 26, 2009, Chen's equipment detected a transmission on 1,100 kHz that began broadcasting personal information about members of his research team. The voice provided accurate details about the team members' academic backgrounds, their reasons for participating in the research project, and private conversations they had held during their drive to Olympic National Park. Chen's direction-finding equipment indicated that the transmission originated from a point approximately 300 yards offshore, in water too deep for any fixed installation, and where no vessels were visible. The signal strength and clarity suggested a powerful transmitter operating at close range, yet no broadcasting equipment could be detected. Most puzzling, the transmission included information about Chen's research methodology and equipment specifications that had been documented only in private research notes he had not shared with his team members. The voice described his plans for future experiments and quoted directly from grant proposals that existed only in draft form on his university computer. Chen's team recorded the transmission and conducted detailed analysis of its technical characteristics. The audio quality was consistent with professional broadcasting equipment, with no background noise or distortion that might indicate amateur or improvised transmission sources. However, the signal's apparent origin point in open ocean made no technical sense. The Federal Communications Commission conducted a comprehensive investigation of the Rialto Beach transmission reports in summer of 2009. The investigation included radio spectrum analysis, searches for unauthorized broadcasting equipment, and interviews with local residents and businesses that might operate radio transmitters in the area. FCC investigators found no evidence of any broadcasting equipment capable of producing the reported transmissions. The agency examined potential sources, including fishing vessels, Coast Guard installations, amateur radio repeaters, and commercial broadcasting facilities within a 50-mile radius of Rialto Beach. None could account for the mysterious personal broadcasts. The investigation team also conducted electromagnetic surveys of the Rialto Beach area to identify any natural phenomena that might explain unusual radio propagation conditions. While they confirmed that the coastal environment created some atmospheric effects that could enhance radio reception, they found no conditions that would enable the detailed personal surveillance described in witness reports. In October of 2009, the FCC concluded that while multiple credible witnesses had reported consistent experiences with anomalous radio transmissions, no technical explanation could be determined for broadcasts that appeared to originate from open ocean locations with no detectable transmission sources. The agency classified the reports as unresolved electromagnetic anomalies and recommended continued monitoring of radio frequencies in the Olympic National Park area. However, no resources were allocated for ongoing investigation, and the FCC file was closed pending new evidence. Reports of personal information broadcasts at Rialto Beach have continued sporadically since the FCC investigation. Between 2010 and 2023, park visitors and amateur radio operators have documented 17 additional incidents following the same pattern. Detailed personal broadcasts in a monotone male voice, apparent transmission sources in open ocean, and no detectable broadcasting equipment. Current FCC policy treats reports of anomalous transmissions at Rialto Beach as routine radio interference complaints requiring standard documentation, but no active investigation. The agency maintains that unauthorized broadcasting remains illegal, regardless of its apparent source, but acknowledges that enforcement action requires identifying actual broadcasting equipment. Olympic National Park Service rangers occasionally receive reports of unusual radio transmissions from visitors to Rialto Beach, but park policy treats these as routine visitor observations requiring no special response. Rangers are advised to suggest that visitors experiencing radio anomalies contact the FCC directly if they wish to file formal complaints. The transmissions continue to appear during low tide conditions, broadcasting private information to listeners who never requested the surveillance, delivered by a voice that knows everything and explains nothing. Somewhere off the coast of Rialto Beach, a signal that cannot be traced continues to monitor lives with the precision of omniscience, reporting personal details to an audience that never agreed to listen, maintaining surveillance that no agency authorized, and serving purposes that no investigation has ever determined. The radio waves carry secrets back to those who thought they were safely forgotten. Broadcast from coordinates that contain no transmitter, operating on frequencies reserved for voices that should not know so much about people who only wanted to listen to the ocean. Some records continue to track populations that no longer exist. The ghost town of Leicester sits along the abandoned route of the Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific Railroad in the Cascade Mountains of King County, Washington. Established in 1908 as a division point for the Transcontinental Railroad, Leicester once housed nearly 300 residents who operated the rail yards, maintained locomotives, and provided services for trains crossing Snoqualmie Pass. The town included a depot, roundhouse, company housing, a school, and municipal buildings that served railroad workers and their families. When the Milwaukee Road ceased passenger operations in 1961 and abandoned the Cascade Tunnel route, Leicester lost its economic foundation overnight. The railroad company dismantled most infrastructure and relocated employees to other facilities. By 1962, the last permanent residents had departed, leaving behind empty buildings and the remnants of a community that had existed for just over 50 years. Today, Leicester consists of scattered foundation ruins, a few deteriorating structures, and the remains of the railroad grade that once carried transcontinental traffic through the mountains. The site is accessible only by hiking trail, approximately 3 miles from the nearest road. King County maintains no services in the area, and the former town site has no official status as a municipality or historic district. Most visitors to Leicester are hikers exploring the abandoned Milwaukee Road right-of-way, or railroad enthusiasts documenting remnants of the transcontinental route. The area receives minimal foot traffic due to its remote location and the challenging trail access required to reach the former town site. Among the structures that remain partially intact is a small building that once served as Leicester's City Hall, housing municipal records, and the office of the town clerk who managed population records, business licenses, and administrative documents for the railroad community. It was in this building that researchers made discoveries that challenged everything they understood about abandoned places and the records they leave behind. Dr. Margaret Chen, a historian from the University of Washington specializing in Pacific Northwest Railroad communities, visited Leicester in September of 2015 as part of a project documenting the social history of the Milwaukee Road. Chen was researching how railroad abandonment affected small communities and was collecting archival materials from former railroad towns throughout the Cascades. Chen entered the deteriorating City Hall building and found filing cabinets containing municipal records from Leicester's operational period. Most documents were damaged by decades of weather exposure, but several ledger books remained legible. Among these was a population register that the town clerk had maintained to track residents, their occupations, and family compositions. The population register covered the years from 1908 through 1961, documenting the growth and decline of Leicester's community as railroad operations expanded and then ceased. Chen expected the records to end with the town's abandonment in 1962, providing a historical snapshot of a community that no longer existed. Instead, Chen found that the population register continued beyond 1962, with entries extending through 2015. The post-abandonment entries were written in the same handwriting as the earlier records and followed the same format: resident names, addresses within Leicester, occupations, and family information. According to the updated records, Leicester maintained a population of 47 residents as of September 2015. The register listed their names, occupations ranging from station maintenance to telegraph operation, and addresses corresponding to buildings that had been demolished or abandoned decades earlier. Chen initially assumed the continued entries were the work of vandals or urban explorers, creating fictional records as a form of historical roleplay. However, several aspects of the updated population register suggested a more systematic and knowledgeable approach than casual vandalism would explain. The handwriting in entries from 1962 through 2015 was identical to that used in the original municipal records from Leicester's operational period. Chen compared letter formations, pen pressure, and writing characteristics across multiple decades of entries and found remarkable consistency, suggesting the same individual had maintained the records continuously. More puzzling, the post-abandonment entries demonstrated detailed knowledge of Leicester's original layout, building assignments, and municipal procedures. Addresses listed in the recent entries corresponded to specific company housing units and commercial buildings that had existed during the town's operational period, using internal lot numbers and building designations that would be known only to someone familiar with the original municipal records. Chen photographed the population register and researched the identity of Leicester's last town clerk. Municipal records held by King County identified Harold Peterson as the final clerk, who had served from 1956 until the town's abandonment in 1962. Peterson had been responsible for maintaining population records and had used the same ledger book that Chen found containing the mysterious updated entries. According to county death records, Harold Peterson had died in 1978, 16 years after Leicester's abandonment, and 37 years before Chen's discovery of the continuously updated population register. Chen returned to Leicester in November of 2015 with additional researchers to conduct a more systematic examination of the municipal records. The team included Dr. Robert Martinez, a specialist in historical document analysis, and Lisa Wong, a graduate student in Pacific Northwest history. The research team found that the population register had been updated since Chen's September visit. New entries showed population changes, including births, deaths, and residents moving between different addresses within the abandoned town. The entries were dated October 2015 and were written in the same handwriting that had maintained the records since 1962. Most unsettling, the updated entries included accurate information about Chen's September visit. The register noted, University researcher Margaret Chen, temporary visitor studying railroad history, departed September 15th. The entry was dated September 16th, 2015, and provided details about Chen's research activities that she had not shared with anyone during her visit to the abandoned town site. Dr. Martinez conducted handwriting analysis comparing samples from different decades of the population register. His analysis confirmed that all entries from 1908 through 2015 appeared to have been written by the same individual, despite spanning over a century and continuing for decades after Harold Peterson's documented death. The team attempted to determine how unknown individuals were accessing the remote City Hall building and why they would maintain elaborate fictional population records for a town that had been abandoned for over 50 years. The building showed no signs of regular visitation, and the challenging trail access made frequent visits unlikely for casual vandals or urban explorers. Wong researched the names listed in the contemporary population register to determine whether they corresponded to real individuals. She found that most names matched residents who had actually lived in Leicester during its operational period, based on railroad employment records and census data from the early 20th century. However, the register showed these historical residents continuing to live and work in Leicester decades after the town's abandonment, and in many cases, decades after their documented deaths. The records described ongoing municipal activities, including elections, business licensing, and infrastructure maintenance, for a community that officially no longer existed. The University of Washington team submitted their findings to the Pacific Northwest Historical Quarterly in spring of 2016. Their article documented the discovery of the continuously updated population register and the apparent impossibility of its maintenance by individuals who had died decades earlier. The journal requested additional verification of the researchers' claims before considering publication. A peer review committee visited Leicester in June of 2016 to examine the municipal records and assess the validity of the reported findings. The review committee confirmed the existence of the population register and verified that entries appeared to continue beyond Leicester's abandonment in 1962. However, the committee expressed concerns about the inability to identify the individuals responsible for maintaining the records and the lack of any plausible explanation for the systematic updating of municipal documents in an abandoned town site. In August of 2016, the Pacific Northwest Historical Quarterly declined to publish the article, citing insufficient evidence to support claims of anomalous record-keeping and concerns about the academic credibility of reporting unexplained phenomena in historical research. King County was notified of the discovery of active record-keeping in the abandoned Leicester town site and conducted an inspection to determine whether unauthorized individuals were conducting activities that might create liability issues for the county. The inspection found no evidence of regular human presence or activities that would explain the maintained population register. County officials decided that the remote location and lack of safety concerns did not justify ongoing monitoring of the site. The municipal building containing the population register was left undisturbed, and no further official action was taken regarding the mysterious record-keeping activities. Researchers who have visited Leicester since 2016 report that the population register continues to be updated, with new entries showing births, deaths, marriages, and address changes among the town's non-existent residents. The handwriting remains consistent with historical samples, and the level of detail suggests intimate knowledge of municipal procedures and community relationships. Current entries in the population register show Leicester maintaining a stable population of between 45 and 50 residents engaged in occupations related to railroad operations that ceased over 60 years ago. The records document a community that continues to function according to municipal procedures established during the early 20th century, maintained by a clerk who died in 1978. The register keeps its own time now, recording the vital statistics of residents who exist only in carefully maintained handwriting, documenting births and deaths in a community that has been dead for over 60 years, tracking the demographics of a population that lives only in the precision of municipal records that refuse to acknowledge abandonment. Somewhere in the deteriorating city hall of a ghost town, Harold Peterson continues his work, maintaining population records with the dedication of a clerk who never learned that his community no longer exists, serving residents who exist only in the administrative reality of documents that update themselves according to municipal procedures that govern towns where no one lives. Some foundations wait beneath the water for tides that remember what was never built. Dungeness Spit extends 5.5 miles into the Strait of Juan de Fuca from the Olympic Peninsula, forming one of the longest natural sand spits in the world. The formation began approximately 4,000 years ago as glacial sediments deposited by the Dungeness River created a curved barrier that grows approximately 4 feet per year toward the northeast. The spit protects Dungeness Bay from Pacific storms while creating unique tidal environments that support diverse marine ecosystems. The spit is managed jointly by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as part of Dungeness National Wildlife Refuge and the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife. Access is limited to protect nesting seabirds and marine mammals, but researchers conduct regular studies of the area's unusual tidal patterns and sediment formations. The spit's remote location and restricted access mean that human activity is minimal and carefully monitored. Dungeness Spit experiences extreme tidal variations, with differences between high and low tide reaching up to 12 feet during winter storms. These dramatic tidal changes expose and submerge large areas of the spit, creating temporary islands and sandbars that appear and disappear according to lunar cycles. Marine researchers have documented these patterns since the 1940s, using the spit as a natural laboratory for studying coastal formation and tidal mechanics. The area's isolation and scientific importance have created detailed records of environmental conditions spanning over 70 years. Research stations monitor water levels, sediment movement, and wildlife populations using equipment that operates continuously regardless of weather or tidal conditions. It was this comprehensive monitoring system that first detected anomalies in the spit's formation patterns that defied conventional understanding of coastal geology. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a marine geologist from the University of Washington, was conducting a long-term study of sediment deposition at Dungeness Spit when she discovered formations that challenged everything she knew about coastal development. Rodriguez had been monitoring the spit since 2008, documenting how winter storms and tidal action shaped the sandy peninsula over seasonal cycles. On February 14, 2011, Rodriguez was conducting routine measurements during an exceptionally low tide when she discovered stone foundations exposed on a section of the spit that should have contained only sand and marine sediments. The foundations formed the outline of a rectangular structure approximately 40 feet by 60 feet, constructed from cut stone blocks that showed signs of professional masonry work. Rodriguez initially assumed the foundations were remnants of historical construction, possibly related to early lighthouse operations or military installations from the late 19th century. However, her research into the area's development history found no record of any permanent structures ever being built on Dungeness Spit. Historical records maintained by the Clallam County Historical Society documented lighthouse proposals for the area during the 1880s, but none had been approved or constructed. Military surveys from World War II showed consideration of coastal defense installations, but again, no construction had occurred on the spit itself. Most puzzling, the exposed foundations appeared to be new construction, rather than historical ruins. The stone blocks showed minimal weathering, and were fitted together with mortar that appeared to be modern Portland cement, rather than the lime-based mortars used in 19th century construction. Rodriguez documented the foundations with detailed photographs and measurements before the next high tide submerged them again. When she returned during the following month's low tide cycle, the foundations had vanished. The area showed only normal sand and shell deposits, typical of the spit's natural composition. Rodriguez expanded her monitoring to include underwater cameras positioned to record changes in the spit's submerged areas. Between March and September of 2011, her equipment documented the foundations appearing and disappearing according to specific tidal and lunar cycles. The structures became visible only during the lowest tides of new moon phases, emerging from sand that showed no signs of recent excavation or disturbance. Dr. James Chen, an archaeologist from Western Washington University, joined Rodriguez's investigation in October of 2011. Chen brought ground-penetrating radar equipment to map subsurface features of the spit during periods when the mysterious foundations were not visible. Chen's radar surveys found no evidence of buried foundations or construction materials in the areas where Rodriguez had documented visible structures. The subsurface showed only natural sediment layers consistent with gradual sand deposition over thousands of years. Yet, underwater cameras continued to record the periodic appearance of stone foundations during specific tidal conditions. The research team expanded their documentation to include architectural analysis of the visible foundations. Dr. Patricia Williams, a specialist in Pacific Northwest building techniques, examined photographs and measurements of the structures during their brief appearances above water. Williams found that the foundations followed construction patterns typical of early 20th century institutional buildings, schools, hospitals, or government facilities. The stonework and foundation design matched architectural standards used in Washington state between 1905 and 1925. Williams contacted the Seattle Municipal Archives to research building plans that might correspond to the foundation layouts documented at Dungeness Spit. Her research revealed architectural drawings for a tuberculosis sanatorium that had been proposed for construction on the Olympic Peninsula in 1915. The sanatorium plans, filed under Project Dungeness Health Facility, matched the foundation dimensions and layout that Rodriguez and Chen had documented on the Spit. The project had been proposed by the Washington State Board of Health as a treatment facility for tuberculosis patients, taking advantage of the area's coastal climate and isolation. However, according to municipal records, the Dungeness Sanatorium project had never been approved for construction. Budget constraints and concerns about access to the remote location had led to the project's cancellation in 1916. No construction had ever begun on the proposed facility. Williams expanded her archival research to include additional building projects that might explain the periodic foundations. She found plans for 3 other structures that had been proposed for the Dungeness area between 1912 and 1928: a marine research station, a quarantine facility, and a lighthouse keeper's residence. None of these projects had proceeded beyond the planning stage, yet the foundation layouts that appeared during low tides matched the architectural drawings filed in Seattle City Archives. Each structure's foundations corresponded exactly to building plans that had been submitted but never approved for construction. The University of Washington research team published their findings in the Journal of Coastal Research in spring of 2012. Their article documented the periodic appearance of building foundations that matched historical architectural plans for structures that were never built. The journal's peer review process raised questions about the team's methodology and the plausibility of foundations appearing and disappearing according to tidal cycles. Reviewers noted that the described phenomena contradicted basic principles of coastal geology and construction engineering. In response to the peer review concerns, the research team invited independent observers to witness the foundation appearances during predicted low tide events. Between June and August of 2012, representatives from the U.S. Geological Survey, the National Park Service, and the University of British Columbia Marine Sciences Department observed and documented the periodic emergence of stone foundations at Dungeness Spit. All independent observers confirmed the existence of well-constructed stone foundations that appeared during specific tidal conditions and disappeared without leaving detectable traces in the sand. However, none could provide explanations for how modern construction materials could appear and vanish in patterns that defied conventional understanding of coastal processes. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which manages Dungeness National Wildlife Refuge, conducted its own investigation of the reported foundation appearances in fall of 2012. The agency was concerned about potential unauthorized construction or historical preservation issues that might affect refuge management. The Fish and Wildlife Service investigation confirmed that no authorized construction had occurred on Dungeness Spit, and that no historical preservation concerns applied to structures that had never been built. The agency concluded that while the reported phenomena were unusual, they posed no immediate threats to wildlife or refuge integrity. However, The Fish and Wildlife Service restricted research access to the area, pending development of protocols for studying anomalous geological phenomena. The restrictions limited future observation opportunities and effectively ended systematic documentation of the Foundation appearances. Dr. Rodriguez continued her coastal geology research at other locations, but maintained informal monitoring of Dungeness spit through automated cameras positioned by collaborating researchers. Between 2013 and 2020, these cameras documented occasional Foundation appearances following the same patterns of lunar and tidal cycles. Current Fish and Wildlife Service policy treats the Dungeness spit Foundation phenomena as unexplained geological formations that require no special management consideration. Rangers are advised to document any unusual structural appearances, but not to investigate or provide public information about anomalous formations. The foundations continue to emerge during the lowest tides of new moon cycles, revealing construction projects that exist only in archived plans and the memory of tides that built what was never authorized. Somewhere beneath the shifting sands of Dungeness spit, stonemasons complete work on buildings that were canceled before their foundation stones were ever ordered, following blueprints that led to construction sites in futures that were never approved. The tide remembers what bureaucracy forgot, carrying forward building projects that exist only in the intersection between planning and possibility. Constructed from the dreams of architects whose visions were rejected by committees, but accepted by waters that recognize no authority except the pull of the moon and the persistence of plans that refuse to remain merely theoretical. Each month, the lowest tide reveals progress on projects that were never begun, built by hands that follow blueprints filed in archives under the heading of good ideas that arrived at the wrong time, waiting for the right tide to make them real. Some roads exist only for those who refuse to be guided away from them. Forest Road 902, one branches northeast from State Route 20, approximately 8 miles east of Concrete, Washington, within the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest. According to U.S. Forest Service maps published since 1973, the road provides access to timber sales areas and research sites in the Cascade Range foothills. The road designation appears consistently in official Forest Service publications, wilderness guides, and topographic maps covering the Skagit River drainage area. The Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest encompasses over 1.7 million acres of mountainous terrain in northwestern Washington, containing hundreds of forest roads that provide access for logging operations, fire suppression, scientific research, and recreational activities. Most forest roads are maintained according to standard federal guidelines and are accessible to high-clearance vehicles during snow-free months. Forest Road 9021 is classified as a Level 3 maintenance road, indicating it should be suitable for passenger cars under normal conditions. The road appears on Forest Service motor vehicle use maps as an approved route for public access, with no seasonal closures or special restrictions noted in official documentation. However, drivers attempting to locate Forest Road 9021 using GPS navigation systems encounter consistent problems. Major GPS manufacturers, including Garmin, TomTom, and smartphone mapping applications, show no road at the coordinates where Forest Service maps indicate the route should begin. When drivers input the specific Forest Service road number or coordinates derived from official maps, GPS systems either display error messages indicating the destination does not exist or provide alternative routes that bypass the area entirely. This technological inconsistency has created confusion among forest visitors who rely on electronic navigation to access remote areas. The discrepancy between official maps and GPS data first gained attention in June of 2009 when Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a botanist from Western Washington University, was unable to locate Forest Road 9021 during a research expedition to collect plant specimens in the Cascade foothills. Mitchell had received a Forest Service research permit to conduct botanical surveys in areas accessed via Forest Road 9021. Her permit documentation included specific coordinates and detailed directions, referencing the road as a primary access route to her designated study areas. Mitchell attempted to navigate to the road using a Garmin GPS unit and Google Maps on her smartphone. Both systems indicated that no roads existed at the specified coordinates. When she contacted the Forest Service office in Sedro-Woolley for clarification, staff confirmed that Forest Road 9021 was an active forest road and provided additional coordinate references. Mitchell decided to navigate using paper maps and compass bearings rather than GPS guidance. Following Forest Service topographic maps, she located the junction where Forest Road 9021 should branch from State Route 20. At those coordinates, she found a well-maintained gravel road with proper Forest Service signage, identifying it as Forest Road 9021. The road appeared to be in excellent condition, recently graded and clearly marked with standard forest road signs. Mitchell drove approximately 6 miles along the route, accessing her research areas without difficulty. The road provided access to timber stands, research plots, and facilities that matched the locations described in her Forest Service permit. Most puzzling, Mitchell discovered that Forest Road 9021 led to what appeared to be an active research facility, approximately 8 miles from State Route 20. The facility consisted of modern buildings, vehicle parking areas, and scientific equipment that suggested ongoing environmental monitoring or biological research activities. Mitchell observed personnel at the facility conducting what appeared to be environmental sampling and data collection activities. However, she had received no notification of other research projects in the area, and her Forest Service contact had not mentioned any existing facilities along Forest Road 9021. When Mitchell returned to Western Washington University and reported her successful access to Forest Road 9021, she learned that other researchers had experienced similar GPS navigation problems when attempting to locate the road. Dr. Robert Chen, a colleague conducting forest ecology research, had been unable to find the road using GPS navigation and had assumed it was temporarily closed or reclassified. Mitchell contacted the Sedro-Woolley Forest Service office to inquire about the research facility she had observed along Forest Road 9021. Forest Service staff had no record of any research facilities or ongoing projects in that area. According to their database, the road provided access only to timber stands and basic forest monitoring equipment. Dr. Chen decided to attempt his own navigation to Forest Road 9021 using Mitchell's successful methodology of paper maps and compass navigation. In August of 2009, Chen followed Mitchell's route and successfully located the road despite continued GPS navigation failures. Chen confirmed Mitchell's observations about the road's excellent condition and proper signage. He also documented the research facility Mitchell had described, photographing buildings and equipment that appeared to be conducting sophisticated environmental monitoring activities. Chen attempted to contact personnel at the facility to learn about their research activities and potential collaboration opportunities. However, when he approached the facility, he found all buildings locked and no personnel present despite evidence of recent activity, including fresh tire tracks and recently collected data equipment. Chen photographed identifying numbers and equipment models at the facility and contacted manufacturers to determine the purpose and ownership of the installed monitoring systems. Equipment manufacturers confirmed that the installed systems were designed for atmospheric monitoring, soil analysis, and biological sampling, but could not identify the purchasing organization or research project associated with the equipment. The Western Washington University research team decided to conduct a systematic investigation of the Forest Road 9021 phenomenon. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a GIS specialist, analyzed the discrepancy between Forest Service maps and GPS navigation data To determine the source of the technological inconsistency, Rodriguez found that Forest Road 9021 appeared accurately in all official government mapping databases maintained by the Forest Service, U.S. Geological Survey, and Washington State Department of Transportation. The road's coordinates and route description were consistent across all official sources. However, Rodriguez discovered that GPS navigation systems sourced their road data from commercial mapping companies that maintained separate databases from government agencies. When she contacted major GPS manufacturers, she learned that Forest Road 9021 had been systematically excluded from commercial navigation databases. Representatives from Garmin and TomTom stated that Forest Road 9021 had been flagged in their systems as access restricted or road condition unknown, resulting in automatic exclusion from routing calculations. However, neither company could identify the source of this classification or provide documentation explaining why the road had been flagged for exclusion. Rodriguez attempted to determine when Forest Road 9021 had been excluded from commercial GPS databases. Her research indicated that the road had been available in early GPS systems during the 1990s, but had been systematically removed from commercial databases beginning in approximately 2005. The timing of the GPS exclusion coincided with increased reports of drivers accidentally discovering the research facility along Forest Road 9021. Between 2005 and 2009, at least 12 individuals had contacted the Forest Service to inquire about the unidentified research activities they had observed along the road. In September of 2009, the Western Washington University research team contacted the U.S. Forest Service Regional Office in Portland to request information about research permits and facility authorizations for the Forest Road 9021 area. The regional office conducted a comprehensive review of permits and found no authorized research facilities or ongoing projects in the specified location. Forest Service investigators visited the site in October of 2009 and confirmed the existence of the research facility described by university researchers. However, the facility showed no identifying signs, permit postings, or contact information that would indicate its authorization or purpose. The Forest Service investigation found that the facility's buildings and equipment appeared to meet federal construction and safety standards, suggesting professional installation and maintenance. However, no construction permits, environmental assessments, or land use authorizations could be found in Forest Service records. In November of 2009, the Forest Service issued a closure order for Forest Road 9021, pending investigation of unauthorized activities in the area. The closure was intended to prevent public access, while authorities determined the legal status of the research facility. However, enforcement of the closure proved problematic because GPS navigation systems continued to show no road at the specified location, making it difficult for law enforcement to locate and monitor the route. Forest Service personnel attempting to reach the area for patrol purposes experienced the same GPS navigation failures reported by researchers. When Forest Service officers used paper maps to navigate to Forest Road 9021, they found that the closure signs they had installed had been removed and the road remained accessible. Repeated attempts to secure the area were unsuccessful because GPS-guided patrol visits consistently failed to locate the road. By early 2010, the Forest Service had discontinued active enforcement of the closure due to the practical difficulties of monitoring a road that could not be located using standard navigation methods. The investigation was suspended pending development of new protocols for managing areas with technological access limitations. Current Forest Service policy treats Forest Road 9021 as an administrative anomaly, requiring no special management consideration. The road remains on official maps, but is not included in public recreation guides or permit documentation due to GPS navigation difficulties. Researchers who manually navigate to Forest Road 9021, continue to report finding an active research facility with modern equipment and evidence of ongoing scientific activities. However, no government agency claims responsibility for the facility, and no research organization has identified the project's purpose or authorization. The road continues to exist in the gap between official cartography and commercial navigation, accessible only to those who trust paper maps over digital guidance, leading to facilities that conduct research according to protocols that no agency authorized and serving purposes that no investigation has ever determined. Somewhere along Forest Road 9021, scientists continue their work in a facility that officially does not exist, collecting data that feeds into no known database, following research protocols that no institution authorized, measuring environmental conditions according to standards that no university established.